Welcome, everyone. This is Michael Gibbs. As many of you know, I'm the founder and CEO of Go Cloud Architects. How are you all today? I have an extremely special treat tonight. Tonight, I am actually here, and it looks like we're actually getting some bandwidth constraints that are going on for the first time ever. So I'm going to do that again because it looks like our screen actually froze while we were streaming on the way to YouTube. So I am Michael Gibbs. I am the founder and CEO of Go Cloud Architects, and I'm real happy to be here today. I've had some guests, but today I have a really special guest. And the special guest that I have today is my absolutely good friend, Daryl Proctor. Now, I got to tell you, I've worked with Daryl 20 years ago. Daryl is one of the best business leaders I know. Daryl is a person that I trust beyond anything. Daryl's the kind of guy that I work to get him hired. He works to get me hired. We've helped each other in our careers for 2+ decades. I've brought him into companies with me. He's tried to bring me or brought me to companies with him. Daryl is an expert. But not only is Daryl an expert in tech, Daryl is an expert at managing your career. In fact, we've got some bandwidth constraints. Let me try and change the stream settings that we're using to try and reduce the bandwidth that we're actually using to see if that's actually possible. I know I typically stream at a pretty high bit rate, and if people don't have quite as good of an internet connection as me, it can cause some problems. So let's just try and cut the bit rate down to try and do this for you to make sure everything is good. So anyway, the point is I've worked with Daryl now for over 20 years, and he is one of the best. Daryl actually leads a team of customer success executives over at Palo Alto. He led a team over at Dell. He led a team over at Rockport Networks. He led a good team over at Alcatel-Lucent, so he's been in this industry forever. What Daryl and I are going to talk about today is managing your career. We're going to talk about how to make sure you have the best career, things that you can actually do to improve the quality of your career, things that you can do to show your management team that you're doing a good job, things that you can do to really, truly change your career. And we keep going offline with our internet bandwidth challenges today. Don't know really what's going on there, but we're going to do the best we can. So that's why I'm excited to be here today. I'm here with Daryl. We're going to work on your technical career development plan. If you're a cloud architect, if you're a solutions architect, if you're a network architect, if you're just getting into tech, if you want to get into cybersecurity, don't wait. Daryl works for one of the most innovative cybersecurity firms in the world. You could probably ask some questions about what's trending in the industry. So super excited to have you all here. If you are here, let us know you're here by typing #CloudHired, and we know you're coming across strong. Otherwise, Daryl, could you introduce yourself and what you do and the kind of things you've been around with for a little while?
Yeah, well, besides my cheeks burning a little bit, thank you for that sweet introduction, Mike. We are good friends, and I do always respect your opinion. We've done a lot of collaboration over the last a couple of decades, indeed. So I'm Daryl Proctor. I have a national, well, we have a division in Palo Alto Networks, the simplest to explain kind of my role, called Cortex. And sort of like the cortex in your brain, the thinking part of your brain, we do the AI in the ClaySec division, which is essentially the automation and the threat hunting portion of gathering intelligence and figuring out what's going on. So for zero-day attacks, for standard malware and antivirus, of course, we cover that as well. But really, it's getting the insights from your environment and letting that put a plan of action of how to see the threat before it becomes a problem. In fact, we caught that big SolarWinds of fame issue in our platform, and that's one of the things that really shows that you need to have a different approach than scanning known risks. My team is the customer success management team covering that platform for the whole US, Canada, and Latin America. And in that role, the customer success managers really guide the journey of adoption and basically understanding and training the product so they can use that technology to leverage for the reasons I described. So in short, I'm the manager running that team. I report to the global director that has the two other theaters that we cover in our platform, which is Asia Pacific and Japan, as well as EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So that's in short what I do. A lot of fun. I really enjoy the technical aspects of it, but I've kind of moved a little more into managing, the metrics. You learn how to use spreadsheets in this job as you get promoted to kind of see what's happening. But still love the technology and love the people. It's been a lot of fun.
It's interesting you say that. Somebody asked me this morning and they said, describe the different steps of the architect. And I say, well, an engineer, you're real technical. And then you become a technical solution architect. You're really technical. Then you become a solution architect. You become less technical. Then you become a cloud architect. You become a lot less technical. Then you become an enterprise tech architect and you become super low technical and super big business oriented. And then you become like a business architect, and then it's all business, no technical. And you know what? I've gotten real good at spreadsheets and I've gotten real good at Word documents.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, Daryl, you were one of the first few people that actually taught me architecture. And you weren't even working as an architect, but Daryl was the consummate architect. I remember 20 years ago, we were doing IP multicast video.
Yeah.
And, I was hired by a company to be a multicast subject matter expert. Daryl was working at the company as the video solution expert. So Daryl was the true architect here. Daryl was working with the middleware providers. He was working with the set-top spot providers. He was working with the video encoding team. He was working with the subject matter experts like me on multicast. Daryl was the first person to really start, when I saw architecture, even though I was previously an architect, he was doing architecture. It wasn't just a box for Daryl. It wasn't just a protocol. He had the whole end-to-end solution. And I remember in those days, I was an architect, but I was still pretty technical. And I was focusing on the protocol, but I learned from Daryl, take it up a step, look at the overall end-to-end solution. And that, realistically speaking, that changed the game for me. It changed it in every way. So I learned that from you, and we're going back like 20 plus years.
20 plus years, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I think one thing in my technical career, or technology career, if you want to say, that is not necessarily unique, but it's unique to me in the sense that my background, I have a business degree. I never really expected to go in IT. One of my favorite classes, back, I graduated in 1990 from college. So aging myself, something like 35 years ago when I was cutting my teeth on, higher education, I liked MIS. They called it MIS at the time. I liked computers. And it was one of the favorite classes, aced it. I became the teaching assistant within, 2 weeks of the class. The professor said, "Hey, I need a TA. You obviously get this stuff. Would you work with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, does it pay?" So I was always a businessman. But in the end, I didn't really think that direction. I really thought about the company and how it ran. What I applied immediately to technology, to the point you were making, is what is the customer trying to do with the technology? What is the environment that the technology has to integrate in? Where does this technology fit in their overall current architecture so that it can actually function? A lot of those questions early on in my career became the key to unlock the pre-sales experience. And both of you and I worked in pre-sales, so it was critical to get those things right. And if you don't solve the problems going into the sale, you'll certainly either have to solve them in post-sales, or you may lose the deal entirely because it actually doesn't have a function, or maybe the value proposition was too narrow and you're going to lose out to somebody else that understands that. So, back 20 plus years ago, and I'll certainly go through all those other companies that you mentioned, every single one of them, that was one of the foundational things I applied as I looked at the problem we were trying to solve with the technology, or even more importantly, understanding, is there a problem here that I'm solving? Ask the right questions. When those questions become illuminated, then you can change your approach to make sure that your technology. And I was one of the, I think probably in most of the companies, I always found some weird new use case that nobody else was selling. And sometimes it blew up and became huge. You've had that in your career with some of the medical direction you took in your career. I certainly had that with multicast because we didn't have the capability. I did that with MPLS, some of the earliest multi-protocol label switching solutions were very bizarre use cases that I did early when we worked together. And those applications actually unlocked a whole new market. But I was asking the right questions to find those different opportunities in my territory. and then elevating it to engineering, to marketing, to executives to figure out, is this an area we should invest in? And so that's, I don't want to spend too much more time on that, but I think that's an important aspect. Find the gift you have, understand how you can use that to your advantage. And from that point, that will really inform a lot of the special part you bring. Yeah, I was smart. Yeah, I did my homework. Yeah, I understood the technology. I had certain certifications that kind of helped build my career. But a lot of it was just really paying attention, asking the right questions, acting on the answers, or finding the answers and acting on the opportunities that are in front of you. And that's kind of really guided often, I'd say, the last 20 years to the better and more fulfilling roles that I have. I would say right now, I'm probably the most challenged, both good and positively, as I've been in my career. But it's all of that stuff came together. And, I've changed different markets multiple times. Like you said, I've done routers, I've done multicast and video solutions. I've done data center designs for carriers. I've done architecture with computers at the core, but applying applications to why the application was the important thing, not the hardware. And then now with cybersecurity, it's understanding what the risk landscape looks like and how does technology replicate and offload humans so we can have the smart people running the machine and not have the machine just autonomously do whatever it wants to do. And that's the key, I think, in my current market, to really be able to leverage automation and learn from your environment the things that you need to pay attention to. And that's what Cortex is about. And that's what I spend a lot of my time now teaching my team.
And that's, Daryl, that's so important. And I got to say, I learned it from Daryl 20 some years ago. I was part of a team of principal consulting systems engineers. And these engineers were really, really, really technical. Yeah. In fact, they were writing RFCs. I mean, this was some of the biggest technical bunch I've ever worked with on this team that I was part of. And when I saw Daryl, and I saw the way he was doing things, and I saw this big picture, and he started with the business, and he asked all these business questions. And then from the business, he got business requirements. And then he actually came in and actually crafted a technology solution. What Daryl did, which was the best, it was my introduction to architecture. He said, Mike, this is multicast. I want your help. Oh, wait, this is interdomain multicast. There's BGP. Hey, you, Mr. BGP, you come over here. Oh, middleware provider, you come over here. I got to tell you, that skill that Daryl had, that was how to become an architect. He, wasn't being called an architect. I think they called him a consulting system something or other.
Yeah, engineer, I think.
Engineer. But it was all architecture that we did. And I remember asking Andrea, and, Andrea was his manager. Andrea, by the way, is that wonderful person that came on and shared lessons of experience. She's the one that's a customer success executive that you guys all got to hear from. And, Andrea admired what you did, and I saw what you did, and I was like, wait, I got to be more like this. And I learned so much. And, when I joined Cisco a couple of years later, and I got told that I was the lead architect for one of the world's largest voice over IP systems, and I said, I've never done voice before. And my manager says, yeah, but you've done video. And I said, but I've never done voice before. My manager says, figure it out. So I thought, what would Daryl do? That's the first thing I did. I think I probably even called you. And then I remember going to my manager. Yeah, I know I called you. And I built a team of all these voice people and all these QoS people and all these people. And I became the guy with the credit card that would buy dinners and drinks and deal with the stress that the people had at the end of the day and smooth over things. And that's what I did. And you know what? I loved it. So, that was the best thing. That was architecture before we called it architecture. Now everything's called an architect. You go to Subway, they have a sandwich architect that's making you a sandwich. We went to go look at new carpets because I have this great cat, Cindy. She's beautiful. She sits on my lap all day, but she chews the carpet. So I'm in the place and they've got a solution architect that's going to redesign my carpet. And I'm like, okay, what does the term solution architect even mean anymore? It's anybody that sells anything. You go to the cell phone store, they got a solution architect. So what even is a solution architect?
Yeah, I think, titles kind of evolve and become popular and people adopt, but that's kind of just poking fun at that is actually a really good point. I try to boil down people's role not caring about what their title is. Because what are they doing? What are they responsible for? What do they actually create at the company, or are they responsible to make sure it runs properly? And that's really what I care about understanding. The title is deceiving a lot of times. Like you said, a carpet architect is probably not somebody I'm going to hire for certain things. Maybe if I've got a carpet need, they may have some value, but they're not going to have a lot of value if they come and apply for an architecture role at a company I'm hiring at. It's going to be irrelevant.
Yeah, and that's going to be irrelevant. Now, there's certain other careers that I see as incredibly relevant, and I love them. Any times where people are learning how to do consultations, communications, troubleshooting things, customer service. Now, these are valuable skills for people like us.
Agreed.
In fact, I remember there was a guy in England. He was going to do an internship with me, and he said, "I want to be a cloud architect." And he said, "I have no tech background." And I said, "What's your background?" He said, "Sales." I said, "No problem." And he said, "What do you mean, no problem?" I said, "The hardest part is to go interact with that client, to be relevant to the CXO, to figure out what that business needs, to truly understand that business. And that is 50% of the job. When you can do that, then the tech is just a tool that we use. And then guess what you got to go do back? You got to go present it back to them, and you got to go sell it to them and convince the customer they need it." I said, 50% of what we do is sales.
Yes. Mike, I was reminded, we're reminiscing a little bit about, back in our early career when our paths crossed. My first break in tech actually got underlined by a completely seemingly irrelevant experience. So one of the things I did as a student is I applied. My dad was a painting contractor, and so he did all things drywall and painting. And I ended up working with him on weekends, and I made money to go through school when I was near him. So I learned a skill from him, and I was decent at it. I was able to carry that into building my own side business. Talk about side hustle in today's vernacular. My side hustle was going up and down a street, knocking on doors, asking people if they wanted a free bid, getting an opportunity to paint or clean their windows or clean their gutters, or I didn't care. I'd do whatever they needed done.
Mm-hmm.
And I would give them a price on the spot. And normally, because I was fairly articulate and they saw that I wasn't looking to rob the place, they would hire me, and I could get more work than I had time on the weekends and after hours at the job I had at the time. Well, about 4 or 5 years later, thinking that was irrelevant, I was building up my resume, and I laid out that I was a business owner, which I was. I had my own business. I had, license and bonding. I had a payroll. I didn't really have a payroll, but I had to, pay my bills. So I was doing businessy stuff in a very manual labor role. And I'll never forget this. The first discussion I had with my boss, he kept trying to push me in new areas. And he said, Daryl, we really, we do this servicing for desktop support. I really want to get into the hardware business. I'd like to start selling the switches that connect everything. I want to get into networking. Is there any chance you would, be willing to come do that? You're really good at talking to people. And I said, well, I'll try anything, but, I don't have any background in this, none. And he goes, what are you talking about? You have no background. You went door to door. You talk to customers all the time. You knew how to run your own business. How are you telling me you're not qualified? And it really taught me a valuable lesson, piggybacking on what you just said. Those experiences that you have, don't make them into something they're not, but they can be relevant to moving from one role to another. And that's kind of what's happened. If I were to chase, kind of the lineage of where I am now backwards, there's been a connection between prior experiences, market opportunity, and just flat out hustle that have combined to make a path to that new direction. And you have to stay current. You have to stay relevant. There's very few people that sit in the same company now for 20 years. I certainly haven't. I've been 10 years at 2. So I had 10 years at the company that kind of did some mergers and divestitures that we worked at, the Riverstone Cabletron scenario. That was about a 10-year. And then I put another 10 years in at Dell. So those were the 20. And then I had a couple of the 5-year stints. So I haven't moved around a ton, but I've had 5 or 6 jobs in each one of those companies. Like, they've changed my responsibility. And that's what kept it fresh. And that's what really kept me growing as a person and driving the success. And I'm not saying this to be about me. I'm not egotistical at all here. It's more of trying to use those examples since we're talking one-on-one here, so the audience can kind of see some insight there, because I really feel like it's relevant.
But that's really a good point, Daryl. So I get asked two questions. One of the questions, I always answer in one way, but the other question is about keeping your career fresh. Now, one of the questions that I get asked, which is, hey, Mike, if I want to be an architect, should I learn software development first, and then after software development, learn engineering, and after that, learn this? And my answer is no. You want to be an architect, learn architecture. But, there's a point in your career where you're going to want to do more than architecture. You might love architecture, and I love architecture because for me, architecture enables me to do the leadership piece because I'm more of an enterprise architect, and it also lets me play with the tech piece, which I love. But, I've gone from when Daryl knew me, I was Mr. Super Technical to Mr. Super Technical to the next thing I realized I'm acting as the account manager because the account manager no longer works in the company. So now I'm enjoying doing sales and I'm fine. Then the next thing I know, I'm a systems engineer doing sales, pre-sales engineering. And the next thing I know, I'm doing doing marketing. And the next thing I know, I'm doing management consulting. And after the management consulting, I'm back to doing enterprise architecture. So the point is that in your career, first get great at whatever your thing is. Daryl is great. He built himself a set of fundamentals that were incredible. His fundamental tools of being emotionally intelligent, of understanding the baseline and the fundamentals of the technology, understanding how to lead a team, understanding how to build a network of people, and understanding how to bring out the best in others. They're his skills. I've seen them. And I got to tell you, with those skills, if he's a Go Cloud Architects tomorrow and I were to die and I were to say, Daryl, run my company, I could do it. Those same skills, it doesn't matter where he goes. So when I train my architects and I put so much leadership skills in them, there's a reason. So much emotional intelligence skills, because when you get your first job, if you don't know, you can use all those tools to be effective by getting the right resources. But if you interview with a Daryl or you interview with me, and it's questionable, you're almost good enough, but if you're the most likable guy in the room or girl in the room, you have a great attitude, Daryl or I have trust that you can do the job and you're willing to work hard, you don't have to be the most technical. You're already the best because you've got some of those other attributes. That's the way I feel. How about you, Daryl?
Yeah. No, I think a lot of people miss the forest for the trees, using the expression. They are really good at understanding an answer to a technical question, but they don't understand why that question is relevant, and they don't understand why the answer might mean one thing to one part of that company and one part to another. So when you're talking to clients or you're talking to customers or you're talking to peers or you're bringing teams together, it may be the same conversation really framed in a different way to make sure that you're communicating. And I think that's one of the things that I'd piggyback on your comment. I 100% agree. Today in the job that I'm doing, building a team of 20 to 1 ratio is a pretty hard ratio to be a frontline manager. And so I just recently instituted a team lead interface. So I've split my team into 3 different groups. Those 3 groups go through a team lead, and I spend more time now mentoring the team lead on how to do the frontline management, and more time trying to understand how are the metrics for the entire US and the business that I'm running are working. And that's an example of where you want to go and take and apply what is being asked of you. Ultimately, the results is what I'm asked to be able to be accountable for, but I have to have help from others. And I think you're right. Those soft skills are paramount. You have to meet people where they are. You have to encourage the things they're good at. The things that they are struggling with, you need to offer them help and give them guidance. And the things they need to change, you have to point it out. You got to be honest with them and show them this is something that we've got to do better on. Here's what I need you to do, and here's by when. So you set a deadline, you set out a clear objective, and then you measure it and you make sure that you're making forward progress. And that's the way I manage my business today. And it's certainly not on me. I can't take the credit. I'm sure you're not going to. I know your humility is such, you'll never take the credit for what you've built. It's the people you surround yourself with and the common goal that you can align each other on that's going to truly measure your success after some hard work. And I think that hustle and that ability to push through tough no's and tough obstacles and learn from your mistakes is what makes you more successful than anything. You're not going to get it handed to you. And you're certainly not going to find some magic key by getting this certification or getting a score. You know, I've interviewed people that want to talk about their grades in college, or they want to talk about all the certifications they have. And when I'm interviewing them, you know, number one, if they bring up, you know, basically a certification, I'll look up that certification, find out what material it should have knowledge of. And you better believe I'm going to sit there and grill it. And the first time they stumble badly, I'm going to eliminate the value that paper was on their resume. That goes away because I feel like maybe it's a paper certification. Maybe they bought a test and learned how to pass it or cheated their way to it. So I'm looking really for people's ability to think, to solve problems, to relate and work with people. That's got to be foundational. And then obviously relevant experience that doesn't have to be perfectly relevant, but relevant. As an example, I've hired people that are great project managers that have worked in professional services, and I have to tilt maybe 20 degrees to get them to be a customer success manager, but they have a lot of foundations. They know, you know, how to be organized. They understand how to do multitasking. They understand how to communicate. They know how to put down a project plan and adhere to deadlines. They understand how to communicate those details to their client. All of those are transferable 100% to my customer success role. But what I found, the things they often miss are, how do I relate to the customer outside of the project? How do I delight the customer by understanding what they really need or what are the obstacles to adoption? And we have to have a much more fluid relationship than your scope of work says X, I delivered Y, I'm done. No. The question is, how is everything working for you? What would you like to do better? How can I help you get there? And obviously within reason, we have to have boundaries about doing everything, but maybe you include a salesperson if it's outside your scope so they can bring a new proposal to that customer to make them successful. Maybe it's, you know, going a little bit beyond and saying, look, I've got this other additional service that you might want to look into. I'll talk to sales. Would you like me to set up a discussion with your salesperson to try to help you in that area you're struggling with? It's not something I can help you with, but those questions elicit that information to provide an opportunity. And again, I'm using the current context of my current responsibilities to explain this has been my approach. Didn't matter whether it was Palo Alto now, or frankly, it was Riverstone back when we worked together 20 years ago. The same technique actually was successful. And I just replayed the same game plan, refreshing it with the relevance of the technology of the time. And essentially people are people. The same people are in both those accounts. You know, I mean, in both of those time spans of my career, the customer was still the customer, and they still had the same requirements or needs that I needed to get from them to be able to understand how I could help them.
You know, I haven't done anything that's that much different in the last 20 years either. Now, the tools that I use are different.
Exactly.
But I still ask the same kind of questions. What are your business goals? What are you trying to achieve? What are your pain points? What are your competitors doing? You know, everything starts at that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all that. And, you know, the difference to me between the engineering and the architect is the architect to me, or the designer, it's about the transformation of the business. What are you going to change?
Yeah.
Figure out the transformation first, and then you adopt the technology. The engineering is after the design has been built, go build it. So, you know, you were an architect. I was an architect. They didn't call us architects in those days. Yeah. Well, I think they called me an architect, and I think they called you an engineer. You were the only architect in the whole company doing real architecture work.
Yeah.
And tying all the pieces together. And, you know, you think how I learned it was two ways. One is practicing medicine, because what happens in medicine? Someone comes into the office, you ask, they say my throat hurts, and you go, okay, let me go look and examine your throat. And then you go into your mental database of problems that could cause a sore throat, which could be viral, or most likely it's beta hemolytic strep group B. And then I think in my brain, okay, what kills beta hemolytic strep group B? And it's amoxicillin. So I do that. Now, is that really any different than the customer has a slow website, and I meet with the customer and I ask what your needs are, and I notice that they have a slow internet connection, and I bump them up to a second internet service provider and run BGP to 2. Nothing's different. It's the same consultative thing. Management consulting. Start with the client, ask some questions, make an idea, generate a hypothesis, and then test a plan. Business architecture. tech architecture, management consulting, medicine, same job.
Yeah, agreed. No, that's a brilliant point. I think, in the end, you normally are hired to solve problems. Customers bring you in to talk about your solution, but they don't care about the technology necessarily. Going back to the early days when we were both in sales, and I looked at my results and I looked at my peers' results. I didn't always have the biggest results, but I had always respectable results. And the people that really struggled, either they hit it perfectly where the messaging just lined up and they just repeated the same message from marketing, but they didn't know anything about the customer and they just pushed hard at kind of delivering that popular item. Or the way I approached it and what gave me longevity is I looked every time, regardless of what I was representing, what problem is the customer having and how can I solve that problem? And part of it may be a partner combined solution. It may not have just my technology. And that's really where I got into the video, because one of the use cases that I found is you had to have low latency for video delivery. We had a low latency switch. It had an ASIC that was custom built. So our FPGA in the days we were there, but ASIC to FPGA. Those devices provided the performance that was needed. But then why did they buy it? Well, because they had a need for low latency. And they didn't have a need for a switch. They had a need for whatever the business was asking for. And that was what I used to differentiate. And ultimately, what I did, and I think it's flattering that you represent it this way. But really the way I approached it in a very straightforward terms is, what are the people in this business that can pull together the components that we can pre-validate and then go in and talk at a solution level instead of talk at a component level. And that's really the architecture that I drove in those days. And that was the discussion that really differentiated our pitch from somebody else with a low latency switch that wanted to talk about how many microseconds it took to process this, and how many megabits does this chipset do, and how many how big is my source address table or routing table. Those things are not relevant to the problem they're solving. They're relevant to the hardware, which is not what they want to buy. They want to buy a solution that solves a problem.
And that getting the solution, it's not easy. Myself and another person on my team, we had spoken to a pretty premier security vendor. I wanted to better understand their cloud security solution. We have an international group. We've got students all over the world. I can find out the Palo Alto one in about 3 minutes. I can call Moses at Fortinet, who is another person that Daryl and I work with. Yep. I know the Fortinet one. I know the Cisco one. But there are a couple of other vendors that are out there. And I called one of the other vendors, and I said, I'd like to speak to one of your security architects to get end to end. So they brought in a meeting. They didn't give me an architect. And if it was an architect, it was not an architect. And the person showed me their firewall.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to know the solution. They said, here it is. I said, no, that's not a solution. That's a box. Mm-hmm. I said, what happens when data comes in? What happens if it's this malware? Does it sandbox it? Does it test it a virtual machine? What happens? Once it bypasses the firewall, what's the IDS, IPS like? What's going on there? What are the heuristics like? What's going on when it hits a host? Is there an agent on the host? Is there an antivirus on the host? Is there an endpoint protection? What kind of firewall? How does it all end to end? We'll have to get a special team for that. I mean, I asked for it ahead of time, and I got a box. And I think customers are frustrated. Yeah. Customers have been asking for how does it work? And then somebody shows up and they mention a name of a service and teach them how to configure it, which is not an architecture. Where they talk about a box and say, my box can do 10 gigabit per second stateful throughput. I just want to know if it's going to work. I just want to know if it's going to secure my system. I don't care. I care. I mean, there's a time where I care about performance standards. But as an executive, the guy with the money, I just care that it's going to work.
Right.
And the architect perspective, I care if it's going to work. I like a Mac. I had a 16-core Mac with 192 terabytes of RAM and 2 GPUs in it. It would crash every time I would try and do streaming video. Doesn't matter that I spent $12,000 for the system to be high availability. It didn't work. Now, I love my Mac. It's been 20 years, but it didn't work. So I dropped that thing and went to this monster Threadripper system. I needed something that would work. I don't care what it is. It just has to work.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the other side of the coin. You know, when you put yourself in your customer's shoes, which is what anybody that's, you know, when you're interviewing, put yourself in, why are they hiring me? What problem are they solving? If I'm selling something, what problem do they have that I can solve for them? And ultimately, if you present a holistic discussion about the challenges instead of your box, they trust that you have a knowledgeable enough perspective that then when we get finally down to the part that they buy specifically from you, they trust that you understand the problem. And I think that's the key to unlocking a more, I guess, constructive conversation. You unlock that by showing that you understand the problems that they have. And you'll differentiate yourself from that guy that's talking about gigaflops this and megabits and bytes that and all the different techno dweeby speak that they picked up on the sales, you know, data sheet. And honestly, they've lost the customer in the first three minutes. Most people are going to understand the problem. They're hiring you for all that techno geek stuff. They don't expect to have to understand it, and certainly don't waste your time on just focusing on that. You need to focus on understanding their problem so that you can come back with a comprehensive solution.
Yeah. Once somebody tells me about express route or direct connection sounds okay. But if I hear about express route, elastic this, cloud this, I instantly tune it out because it's not solving my problems. It's some name that somebody figured out to try and abusify what we're really doing. I want to know exactly what problem you're solving. What is it? I'm thirsty. I'm going to drink water. What is the problem? The problem is I'm thirsty. The water is the solution. Yeah. So, you know, I remember I was in an MBA program and the professor says, no one's ever answered this question correctly. So I'm going to ask you all. I've been teaching for 20 some years. And I remember the professor says, you've got a building and it's in a cold area. It's the winter time. There's two people in the building. The heater went out. What's the problem? And everybody in the class said, the heater's out. The heater's out. And I said, and the guy looked at me and he said, what's your answer to the problem? I said, I don't know if there's a problem or not. But if there is a problem, it's going to be that the people inside are going to be cold or maybe in danger. That's the problem. Now, the solution might be fix or replace the heater, but the heater is not a problem. Yeah. What the problem is what's going on with the people. Now, the professor actually got pale and he starts laughing and he said, in 20 years, you're the only person that solved it. And I don't know why. It was so obvious. The problem was not the broken heater. The problem was that there's people inside and they're cold. And I remember one lesson that I really appreciated about Cisco. And I joined Cisco. They said, we don't sell boxes. Look, we sell routers, we sell switches, we sell firewalls. We solve customer problems. And they put a lot of time and effort into helping us learn how to solve customer problems. That mattered to me. And I know you're an elite company right now, and that company solves customer problems every single day. So if you were starting out, Daryl, because you and I both started out a little strange. If you were starting out, what would you tell someone about the tech world? Do you like it? Is it a great place to be? You know, things they should learn, where they should get their fundamentals. Just what would you tell someone new?
You know, I think today it's probably a different path than I took. I mean, I'm not going to be arrogant and say that, you know, people could replay, you know, what I did. But I think another way to kind of frame that question is, what am I looking for at people that come and apply for a position? And so I think the thing that I'm looking for is, you know, the basics. Did they show up on time? Did they send me a thank you note afterwards? I notice that stuff big time.
Me too.
And if they don't, it's a big black, you know, mark. I take that probably more serious at my age than maybe a new hiring manager would. But, you know, I think those etiquette things are important. I also care about their coming prepared. They've done the research. I don't want them not understanding my company and what we do. That was completely available to them before they got in front of me. So if they have no clue on what I do or misrepresent it dramatically, like they are, like sometimes you can make a mistake and I'm not going to hold them responsible to know every nuance. But if they don't know the difference between my divisions, or they think that they're talking to me about one technology and I'm hiring them for another, that's maybe a sloppiness that's going to translate to the job, right? So that's another thing that I'm going to be paying attention to. But from a resume and an experience level, I'm also going to be interested in understanding, do they have some background that's translatable? It doesn't have to be a perfect mirror match of the exact same job at my competitor, although that's going to actually qualify them quicker. My screening process will let them through quicker to me to talk to them. And everybody realize you are screened like crazy before you get to a hiring manager. So building a proper resume with the right words on it, in the right databases, with the relevant facts represented is very, very important, because that's a pre-screening prerequisite to get to even a human. That is now a different thing than I would have had. Referrals can still bypass some of those, those nets, but at the same time, it's really important. So, in my career, I always took and applied my base of experience and thought about how it's relevant to the direction I wanted to change. So when I got offered a new position, like I described earlier, the story about, one of my early bosses said, "Hey, could you we want to get into this business. Could you do this?" And, at the time I didn't have the confidence I have today. Now I'd say, well, sure I can, but what are we trying to do? That would have been a better question at the young me than what I asked. But at the same time, it really taught me one of those lessons. And so I think figuring out what you have as a gift, maybe it's an intellect, maybe it's personal interaction. And then are there experiences or examples or of previous roles which are good examples of why that is translatable? And be ready with those examples. And again, you don't have to throw those at the front of the question. You can take a question and make sure those points are made during the answer. Notice, Mike, the question you ask is not exactly the question I'm answering. So take that flexibility, as long as you're not really pissing off the manager because you're going so far off the reservation. They think you're somehow, kind of missing a screw because you're not answering the question they asked. But at the same time, I think your answer can illuminate parts of your background. Good answers have an answer to the question, and it also gives you a platform to answer other things you expect they're going to care about. And that's going to help give you more face time. Because let's just say they ask 3 questions and make their decision. Well, if you answer them, yep, nope, you're going to have a nope at the end of that, because you didn't really answer the question that it was trying to get at. So, that's another point I want to expand on. Just one more point. Understand what the question is trying to actually ask. It's never what you're asking. No. So they're trying to understand your experience, or they're trying to understand your background, or they're trying to understand, are you trustworthy, or are you responsible? What is it they're trying to understand? And then your answer better damn well answer that question, but that may not be the words they ask you the question in. They may not have framed it in that term. Some of the better prep books, I've read things like, what questions are you going to expect if you get hired at Google? And the better prep discussions are around, what questions are they getting at? What are some of the answers you better come prepared for, because you will be asked these and you better have a good answer or you're done. And that was a really interesting exercise that I went through when I was, looking. I was kind of in my mid-career about 3 years ago. I'd done the same thing for a long time. My juices were not flowing as freely as they should have as far as motivation goes. I had kind of been on a treadmill, I felt like, and I wanted a new challenge. And in that moment, when I was trying to plot out where are the market opportunities that can be my second act effectively, what should I be doing to have fulfilling interactions at work and home, and what changes do I want to make? That whole expansion of my horizons, picking cybersecurity as my next interesting field that I knew would sustain me through my retirement, that really illuminated some of the things I'm talking about. I did research with the companies, figured out what they did, what markets did they have that were not fully developed so that I could have opportunities in those markets. Where would I, what types of things would I need to know? Were there some additional certifications that might give me some credibility? All of those things were part of my planning when I was looking at that second act career. And it didn't take 5 minutes. It took, about 7-8 months for me to get an opportunity at Palo Alto, but they were at the top of my list. It wasn't the only place I applied though. I applied all over. I got better at interviewing for security jobs by the other interviews I kind of didn't do as well. By the time I got to the interview that mattered, I crushed it because I was ready for it. And that's really the thing I would say to answer your question. You know, you need to really do your research, understand what questions you might get, take the clues from the question to make sure that you're answering and some. You know, the and some can't be just bloviating forever, but you know, having some additional things that you take your relevant experience in your example can make a big difference. You know, don't ever just make assertions. Give examples with what you're saying your capabilities are instead of an assertion, which is maybe I believe you, maybe I don't.
So with you, you've got to make it clear, showing them your capabilities. They ask a question, what are they trying to see? Your communication skills, your emotional intelligence, your executive presence. They're not just looking to see if you know a piece of technology. They're looking to figure all of it. They're looking to see if you lie. Because if you lie, the interview is over. I mean, we may be polite, but the interview is over.
Yeah.
So they want to see how hard. And they also want to see what you do when you don't know the answer.
Yeah.
For example, if I said to Daryl, if Daryl asked me about a piece of tech that I didn't know, and I said, Daryl, I've not had the opportunity to work with that technology yet, but I'm highly energetic, I'm highly motivated, and I really love tech. And if I was part of your team, I would do anything necessary to learn this. But I'm not an expert on this, and I want to be honest with you. But you know what, Daryl? I know IPsec, I know BGP, and I know IP multicast. And if you'd like to assess my competency, I can talk to you about here, but I just want to be honest with you. How would you feel as the interviewer with that, Daryl?
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, I would respect the honesty. I may ask a follow-up question and say, now that you have IPsec experience, which is clearly securing a transmission between two endpoints, tell me how you believe that relates to endpoint technology, because we're also doing the same thing. And so I would possibly do a follow-up, and then I would assess, is your answer relevant? Are you just smoking me? And if you're smoking me, I'll lose interest pretty quickly. I won't be rude, but you know, that interview is over in my mind. I'm finding an exit from that interview as opposed to engaging in, okay, maybe they don't have exactly the same, you know, in the end, let me say it a different way. In the end, when I interview you against 10 other people, those 9 other people are going to have different scores. I'm going to remember the fact that I got some things that I liked and some things that I didn't with every one. And they're going to weigh on, do I think they can do the job in the end? Not exactly did they answer every question perfectly, but were they an employee I want to hire? Are they somebody I can trust when they're working on their own without me being around? Do I believe they're going to be accountable when they have things they need to get done? They'll do it on their own and be self-starters and motivated for doing their job, or do I have to, you know, basically watch them all the time? Those are all things that are going to matter outside of just those technical answers. So the way you phrase that created confidence that you've got some technology that's not trivial, that you understand, and you picked, I mean, we're making this up real, but you know, you would have picked the closest thing to that technology. You would have certainly understand what it is. Yes. You know, another way you could have answered that is said, I very much understand whatever technology is. However, I want to be honest, I don't have a lot of hands-on experience. If I
understood the technology, I would have done that and same, be honest. But if I really didn't know, the last thing I want to do is lie.
Yes. Oh yeah, I know what that is. Because then the follow-up question is going to crush you and you're done.
Yeah, because you know, I literally speaking kept a box of cookies in my office because I interviewed so many people, and I don't even eat sugar, and I don't eat white flour either. And I kept cookies. And the second somebody lied to me, the interview was over. And what I wanted to say is, get out. You lied to me, get out. And I don't try to light up. I just started feeding people cookies. And that way I'd figure about 15 minutes. I wouldn't leave a bad taste in their mouths. I'd escort them out of there. And then, you know, but for me also, it's about, do they send that thank you note? Is the thank you note well written? Do they have the proper grammar?
There are 10 grammar errors in the letter is going to matter to me. I took grammar and I know how to speak my native language pretty well. And I expect people that work for me need to know how to properly not misspell things and, you know, do horrible grammar. Like I care, in my generation, I care about that stuff. I don't want a text letter, you know, that you would do in shorthand. I want proper English So take the time to check it. You can easily find places to check it if it's not your gift. If you're a student that's international and you're going to a different language, of course, people will give you some grace if it's not your native language. But do at least make an effort here. Sorry to jump on top of that point, but these are things you can control.
I think that's really important, but the reality is, pragmatically speaking, it's pretty impossible to hire somebody for any of these architecture roles that can't write a proper email anyway. I mean, so, you know, they just can't do the job because they're going to be now. People say, wait, I'm from another country. And I say, we all are. And people say, what about my accent? And I say, we all have an accent. And I said, if I go to England, I've got an accent.
Exactly.
You know, when you watch BBC TV in America, and I don't understand why, they have subtitles for English people because some Americans have a hard time understanding English people. I don't get it, but we all have an accent.
Yeah.
You know, if I say close or open the lights instead of turn the lights on or off, because in Greek, that's what they would do.
Sure.
Nobody cares. They're going to see that. Oh, that's right. Mike's a Greek guy. And, you know, if I have an accent, guess what? Fine. But we have to be able to write a proper email.
Exactly.
And the things that I also look for, I look at the speed that email was written. If I write someone an email and they get back to me in 2 minutes, I feel pretty good about that person.
Yeah, that's true.
If I write somebody an email and they don't respond for hours, or I call them and they don't answer their phone, I lose trust very, very fast, because responsive in my mind is part of responsibility. Look, there's all things that we can learn, but, you know, responsiveness, you know, and maybe I get that from medicine. Maybe I get that, you know, somebody doesn't call me. If I don't call them back, somebody's going to die. But if I've got a customer with $1 billion architecture and they've got a problem, they need to call back. I've got a BGP outage, they need to call back. So, you know, responsiveness, and you can demonstrate that on the interview, but responsiveness, I think, is a big impact on getting hired, getting fired, getting promoted.
Well, and, you know, look, if you want them to read your email response back, they're at their computer, you know, because you just got the email. So if you had the fortune of being there and seeing it come in, get on it right then. Get back to them right then. If not, make sure that you have it in place before the next morning, so when they get up and read their email, it's there. You know, I utilize scheduling a lot more in my job now. One of the big initiatives we went through is work-life balance. And now I work late at night sometimes because when I need to focus, I can't have 2,000 interruptions. So sometimes some tasks I save and I'm working late. But I now use the scheduling feature in my browser, and I send it reasonably early in the morning, not crazy early, like 4 in the morning, but I'll send it at 8 in the morning for sure, their time zone. And that way I know before they really get sucked into their day, I'm part of that first scan if that's an important note. So there's some other little simple tips that you can use to make sure that you're showing the responsiveness. And if you're writing it in the middle of the night, then take the time to do the spell check. Take the time to, you know, make sure the grammar is right. I mean, now any kind of decent word program or, you know, word processing program is going to do some of the basic checks. Take the time to do those and make sure that you get help if it's your second language, because again, that may not matter to some hiring managers. It certainly matters to me. And I know it does to you, Mike. So it shows level of detail. It shows other things besides, you know, perfect Queen's English. That's not why I'm having this rant about it. It's just, you know, attention to detail. Don't think that the way you would talk on Twitter is the way we want to communicate in business, at least not yet. That's not a thing. I want proper interactions, and I expect that of my team.
And also, but it's kind of critical because in your role, you're going to be dealing with some pretty senior executives.
Yes.
As an architect, you're going to be dealing with some pretty senior executives.
Yes.
And, you know, if I'm speaking Greek and you're speaking Italian, we're not communicating. If you're speaking Greek and I'm speaking Greek, we can have a conversation. If you're speaking English and I'm speaking in English, we can have a conversation.
Right.
And if the CEO expects to be spoken to in one language and the architect does not speak to them in CEO language, it's no different than Greek and Italian. There's not only does there no communication, but the CEO is going to kick that person out of that office so darn fast. And once they get out of that office so darn fast, they're not coming back, because that CEO does not have any time. I mean, literally speaking, no time. I mean, I get 3,000 emails a day, and I'm not that big of a company. I mean, we're big, but we're not that big. We only have 3 employees right now. So, you know, imagine what's going to happen, you know, 6 months from now. So, you know, the point being is, you know, as companies grow, as people grow, they have a lot of things, but you got to be able to do things. So yeah, totally agree. So thank you with that. So actually, you know, along with that, actually, let's not ask you that question that I was going to ask you. So what do you like to see in a resume? I'll tell you the things that I like to see, but I want to hear you answer it first, so I don't bias you.
So, I think this has kind of been alluded to earlier, but I'm looking for relevant experience. I'm gonna check that first. If they don't have relevant experience, then there's going to be a sifting or sorting function. So I think some of what you have to care about is when you're applying for a job, you can't misrepresent your background, but you need to think about what is it this job is requiring, and do I have the experience in that field or something close to it so that I can explain it. So I'm going to look for relevant experience. The second thing, and I see this with a lot of young people, I am not looking for somebody that's jumped around every 12 weeks or 12 months. I am not interested in somebody that doesn't show any longevity. It's going to take me a year of investment to get anywhere near full productivity from an employee. So if somebody's going to leave right when I've made them productive to kind of stair step on my company, no thanks. I'm going to ask a lot of hard questions about why they moved around, and if there's any crack in their answer, they're not a candidate. I'll go to somebody that's been around. So longevity in a position, we kind of have, different experiences or different circumstances dictate maybe that you've had that in your background. But just realize, I've advised my own children, hey, suck it up. And I know this job isn't perfect, but you don't want to have every 12 months you changing jobs. Put up with this situation a little longer, get some more experience from it. I recommend you stick it out for another 6 months. I've said that to my own daughter, and I would certainly say it to answer your question. So, relevant experience with at least some representation of what you did. It was interesting. One time I applied at Dell, and I'd worked at Cabletron Riverstone for 10 years, but I had it in such a way that because the logos had changed, because divisions had changed, I had all these different names. And the person interviewing me read my resume and thought I jumped around 6 times. And I finally broke through and talked to him live because I had his phone number. I called him 3 or 4 times, and finally he picked up. And then he goes, yeah, I wasn't going to get back to you because you moved around too much. And I said, whoa. I've been here 10 years. What do you mean I've moved around? Because your resume, you moved around 6 different times. I said, those are inside the same company. I'm sorry that I confused you. And I went about explaining my background.
Yeah.
And once that objection was removed, I got the job offer that day. I mean, he gave me a verbal and said, I think you're a fit. I need you to talk to my director, but I think you're a fit for this job. You've got all kinds of background that we're looking for. And it was called an enterprise technologist, which was, you talked about enterprise architect. That's what I was doing. And so that breadth of experience showed him very easily I could have a conversation with a customer, and I'd done it for years and years and years. It wasn't a first rodeo at Dell. And that was, again, I think getting onto the tangent of what am I looking for? I'm looking for someone that can do the damn job. And so I'm ascertaining that through looking at the resume. And there's some little tips or little clues that may tip me off that they may be or may not be the right candidate. And, if you think about it, a resume is a sifting process more than it is a hiring process.
Yes.
We're eliminating the bad hires immediately. And so if you end up getting classified as a bad hire, you're gone. You're not getting back in. I've interviewed or I've applied, I applied at one company 4 different times. And at the 4th application, I said that, there's something about the way that they are sorting. I'm not going to make it through. I'm going to go move on to another company. I'm not going to be a fit here. And I'm at peace with that. I don't keep, swinging at the same, bad pitch. It's not over the plate. I'm going to go find one that is, using the World Series analogy. And that's really what I would recommend people do.
And actually, you just hit a really important point. Something that I try to tell people, if you're trying something and it's not working, it's one thing to be mentally tough, and everybody knows me, I'm all about mental toughness. But if you're trying something that's not working, and you tried it twice and it's not working, and 3 times that it's not working, don't keep repeating the same thing in the same way. Change your tactic.
Yes.
So if you try once or twice and 3 times and it's not working, do something different. Just do something different. I mean, to me, it's insanity to assume that if you do the same thing again and again, you're going to get a different outcome. Keep going. Stay in the fight.
Yeah.
Like, for example, you might try and do one thing. And in the process of trying to do one thing, you may find that it's not the right one. Guess what? Do a tangent one that's 5% different. Go conquer that. Go crush that. And wow, try it again.
Well, it's funny. I think of the analogy that's used all the time. Edison invented the light bulbs, but how many times did he fail? Well, he didn't fail trying the same damn experiment. I'll promise you that. He tried different experiments until he got an answer.
Exactly.
So, that's a very good life. That's a life lesson, but it also works in the interview process. So were you going to bring in some people online? I mean,
yeah, let's start with some questions.
Did we lose everybody after this conversation?
No, honestly, the questions just started to bundle in about 10 minutes ago. They started to come in. I think so many people were so happy listening to Daryl that they just didn't ask questions. So Jesse, if we want to start collecting questions, before we do that, if you guys are having fun, if you can hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, tell others about it, share this link with others. It helps with the algorithms. Everything's an algorithm these days. So if you can help us tune the algorithms, appreciate it. So Jesse, if you can start bringing in the questions. And actually, Jesse, this helped us. Please make sure you hit the like button and show Mike and Daryl some love. So thank you so much, Jesse. I really appreciate that. Jesse, if you want to bring in the next one. Aqua. Daryl, what are the sensible questions to ask beyond the compensation package about the work culture that you'll be entering?
I think that's a really there's a smart question behind that, or I think probably a smart 10 Aqua behind that. I never talk about compensation initially. If it's going to be a fit, I need to make sure that it's a fit before we sit there and get eliminated because I'm asking about money too early. I mean, to some degree, you don't want to waste your time at jobs that are going to pay you half of what you're expecting. But at the same time, I would not bring up the money question real early. I mean, the culture, I think, is an important question because ultimately, if it's not a fit for you or if you're not a fit for them, then you're going to fight other things. Money is not going to make that a better place to work. You're going to hate it. So I think questions I would ask is, I see that you've been a company for 20 years. What do you think led to that success? You've continued to grow. What is it that you want your people to bring to make you successful in this job you're having? You can try to explore various ways or take an example of, some kind of, if you're excited by, some of the social outreach that the company does, some of the causes they support, then understand those ahead of time and maybe ask a specific question about those things, which would illuminate some of the things about the culture they're in. If you are interested in their stance on particular things, I would stay away from politics, but you can talk about things that are relevant for, maybe one of the causes you are excited about is, climate. And if climate's a big deal to you and you see they have a lot of things that are related to climate on their marketing pages, then that could be an area where you try to understand what's their approach to that. What are their objectives? I mean, there's areas where you can dance close maybe to a little bit of politics, but definitely stay away from direct. But that's how I would say to get a culture. If you say culture, you're meaning about how do they treat employees? There's various ways I might interpret that. Some of that can be, just, again, I would look more at what types of things are they investing in. You could certainly talk about their benefits as an indirect way of getting a little closer to actual dollars and cents. But, don't start that question real early because I'm looking to solve a problem. I'm not looking to give somebody benefits. I'm not looking for someone that's just interested in the dollar figure. And do realize every time that I give an offer, I make sure that the employee understands it's a total take-home pay that matters. It's configured various ways in lots of companies. There may be bonuses. There may be MBOs that kick into your compensation. Mm-hmm. There may be options. There's a lot of ways you're compensated in at least a larger company. Try to make sure that you understand that all of that is going to be the holistic part that you want to evaluate, So getting down to how much would I make per hour is probably not a relevant question anyway, because there could be so many other parts of it that would fit into, is this a good deal for me or not? And you need to get that after you know it's a fit. And so I think I like the culture question embedded there, because that is what you want to explore beyond the package.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch that for a second, Aqua. The company's not going to tell you their culture. For example, I know a cable company that likes to make advertisements about their wonderful customer service because they were the rated lowest in the industry.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of companies, they're like a lot of people, they don't know their strengths and they don't know their weaknesses. I'd rather do the research. What do the people look like that are walking down the hallways? Do they all look like robots that are all one kind of person? Do they look like there's some diversity in between them? This meaning is are they all wearing blue suits and white shirts? If they are, it's going to tell you something. Somebody's wearing a golf shirt and somebody else is wearing a suit. There's diversity in appearances. There's diversity in personalities. That's going to tell you something. Are the people smiling? Do the people look angry? When you hear things about the industry, does the industry say good things about the way they treat their employees? So personally, I never get involved in asking any of these kind of questions. I let them determine. I don't ask money. They ask me money. I dodge that until I can't dodge it anymore. And I typically dodge it and say, for me, it's about being part of the right company where I can make a big difference in the company and help that company grow and company to succeed. See, the thing is, they can pay you whatever they feel like within reason for the most part. And a lot of that's going to be based upon how well you do on that interview. So if they give you a different title, like it's happened to me because I love the interview, they can do that. So I try to not pin the manager down. I try not to pin myself down. I try to just, it's a competition. Go in there and win that competition. That's what I do. At least that's my recommendation.
Yeah, I've upgraded the job title, and I've actually changed a rec for the right person before. So if we would have had money and you would have indicated that you're not willing to look at the opportunity at the company, if a company is growing, realize that your starting salary isn't your ending salary. There's a lot of, I've shared with a lot of people, I have never once gone into a company applying for being a manager. I've always gone in as an individual contributor. It just happened that the biggest contribution they found within months was I would manage a team. And that's what brought me into management. It wasn't because I applied for the manager job. I did that at Dell. I did that at Palo Alto. I did that at Alcatel, 3 big Fortune 100 companies that had large teams. And that's what led to management, was just doing my job well and bringing people along with me when I was doing it. Some of the things we talked about earlier, Mike. So I think that's a real important, don't step in that. That's jeopardy. This whole line of discussion has probably got more downside than upside for you.
Yeah, I would just avoid it. And yeah, I've gotten the same promotions the same way Daryl did. I wasn't the glory hound. I wasn't looking for anything fancy. You just did my job, and people are like, wait, that team's doing a lot more ever since you've been leading them or mentoring them. Okay.
Yeah.
Jesse, you want to bring in the next one? Kishore, thank you note can be sent to a recruiter thanking everyone as if the only direct contact available. How do we get the contacts of everyone that was interviewed? So Kishore, I recommend that when you interview with a hiring manager, you ask them for a business card.
Yeah. Or you can say, hey, I want to follow up. Can I have your email?
Yes.
Right. Or you can figure out my first name, my first initial, last name is unique enough. My email is D Proctor, so it's pretty easy to figure that stuff out. You can see a lot of companies have some kind of a pattern. If they don't, then you can't guess it. But certainly you can also understand, or your recruiter will know. Usually, they may not give it to you, but normally a recruiter is trying to facilitate the connection. So your recruiter may give it to you as well. Ask your recruiter as well.
Absolutely. Jesse, you want to bring in the next? Noel. A quick search on jobs available at Palo Alto. Noel, love it. I know you. You're awesome. Return primarily senior and principal positions. Awesome, Noel. Do you guys offer opportunities for freshers? And if so, what's your advice at landing an opportunity? Good job, Noel.
Yeah, Noel, depending on what your age, if you're in college, we do have an internship program. And one of the little known secrets I'll let out of the bag here is we do have some active recruiting from college to do summer internships, and support actually is an area where we have a need, and you can learn a ton about technology and support because you're getting all these different challenges customers are having. You have to learn the product. You can certainly go get a lot of the background in firewalls, for example, online. There's a free service out there with a lot of our base technology available for pennies. It's not an expensive course. And at Palo Alto, the senior and principal means we're really building and growing a team. So depending on what different team you're on, we have basically ClaySec, which is the cloud and AI security, and that's basically the division I'm in. And then there's the traditional. They have a name for it, but it's basically our traditional firewall business. And those two divisions, depending on what opportunities at the time, I think right now they're focusing on building the leadership core, which is really the beginning of growing the team. So I don't think it indicates we're not going to have opportunities for people without experience. But go again, if you want to work at Palo Alto, relevant experience is going to be a pretty big sorting function. We're not going to hire somebody from a completely irrelevant industry typically. The things we've talked about earlier, Noel. But I think internship is one, to get back to a specific answer. Secondly, make sure that you watch the website. The job offers will change. And thirdly, you can apply for a job, not necessarily senior or principal. Those are definitely senior positions that you're not going to get past the door if you're not. But see if your recruiter will interact with you and find out. Say, look, I really want to work there. Are there some other parts of the company I can apply? And don't be so fixated on a job title. Remember, we talked about this earlier. Job titles at my company aren't necessarily the indicator. One of the I guess I'll share this story too, Mike. When I went to Palo Alto, a former guy that worked for me, I was his boss, worked at Palo Alto, and I was looking at Palo Alto. So I looked on LinkedIn. I have a fairly big network like you do. And I'm like, hey, so his name is Dustin. I said, Dustin works at Palo Alto. Awesome. So I reached out to Dustin and I said, look, I want to work at Palo Alto. They're top of my list. How do you like it? And this is a culture answer that we just had. Find somebody in the company and talk to them. If you've got a decent LinkedIn network, at least at my age, I've got people in most companies in my network. And essentially the answer back was, yeah, I was looking for a particular position, and Dustin applied for customer success manager, which wasn't even a thing for me. I didn't even know what it was. I'd never thought of that as being a career opportunity. And sure enough, that was the interview that landed me a job at Palo Alto, and I'm happy in that lane right now. But it was kind of ironic that I got to the company I wanted to, doing things that I like doing, that I thought about before I applied, but it was to a totally different position. So that's another way, Noel, I think, to look outside of a specific fixation on a specific title. Once you get in a company, you can certainly, after 18 months, move to something else. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing to really consider when you really want to get to a specific company.
And there's a cloud company. It was a special cloud company that I really liked. I had a close friend that was working there. I was going to join there as a customer success director. And that was why? Because I liked the company so much. And because a friend reached out to me and said, hey, I need a director of customer success that's going to be an industry expert, that's going to make sure customers in this vertical are super successful. Are you interested? And I heard it and said, not done customer success before. Sure sounds like management consulting to me. Sounds like fun. And they said, and then they said, well, you can do whatever you want. I said, so if I want to be a management consultant / enterprise architect, I can do that? And they said, sure, make it whatever you need. Just make our customers successful. So none of these jobs really have strict job titles. I learned that a long time ago.
Yeah.
There's what needs to be done, but there's lots of things to do more. Ayodeji, Daryl, please tell me a few questions you would like to be asked when it's over to the candidate to ask his or her questions from the interviewer.
Good question. So, I think I'm interested in understanding a little bit about the person beyond just their job life. So I think that's one of the areas that is I always ask that, so what do you do in your spare time? I'll try to explore there. But you can also ask them some personal things. I think, you don't ask if they're married or, like obviously use your common sense here, but I'm talking about what are your hobbies or, are you new to the area? Have you grown up here your whole life, and try to engage them a little bit on the interest areas so you can connect with the person. Because if you have something in common, that's not a bad thing. I think that's something that I would say you could also try to understand, but you're turning it away from you a little bit and asking the question. Now they may turn it back to you, and that's a good opportunity. So make sure you have a decent response to that line of questioning. But I have often talked to the person outside of their job because there's some clues there on what kind of person they are. What kinds of things are they interested in? Are they sitting around all the time, just staring at a television set? Or are they an active person that gets out and has experiences? And frankly, maybe it's my age, but I want to see somebody with diverse experiences because I think it enriches their life. No, maybe your thing is movies and games, and that's okay. Be honest about who you are. But I think that's what I would say is get a little bit of personality and what makes that person tick, without, again, being careful about, sounding like you're asking them out if they're the opposite gender or,
don't stay away from that.
There's some things you could do that would hurt you. It's my point.
I think, Daryl, that's great. Now, I'm a little bit I have a slightly different take, but I love Daryl's take. I'm kind of a cyber stalker. So if I know I'm going to interview with someone, the first thing I want to do in the first couple of seconds in that interview is establish rapport. So I'm going to know what this guy or girl does and what the kind of foods they eat, what kind of sports they have, what their hobbies are. I'm going to learn about their careers. I'm going to research them and know it ahead of time to try and inject it in the conversation. Now,
did you work in the same industry or same job previously? A lot of times I've got a company connection or a network connection, and I may ask that, hey, I worked with so-and-so that works there. Do you know them? And that's another way of, again, you're quickly bridging the gap. Sorry to cut you off, Mike, but I think that's a really smart point.
Yeah. So try and get that up top. And then what I typically do is the question I ask is, Mr. and Mrs. Hiring Manager, what are your goals? So that if I was part of your team, I would know what I could do to help you succeed. I try and put it back into their frame, let them tell me, and then I try and use that as an opportunity to sell them on how I have the skills to help them do their job better, to be more successful and get promoted.
No, I think actually that's the answer she needs. I think getting, or she or he, I'm sorry if I don't.
He's a great guy.
Yeah. So I think that's a really smart question, to try to understand what is it that's going to, you could ask it in a similar way of, when you look at a successful candidate, what do you want them to have? And then you want to show them how you're that successful candidate, right? So you're illuminating other things about what are their hiring criteria, and that's an opening for you to show that that's you.
Jesse, you want to bring in the next one? Ajish, how often does the person get feedback after interviews? You know what, Daryl? I've only interviewed with 5 companies, and I've been hired by all 5. So I've always gotten feedback, and 2 or 3 of the 5 were immediately hired on the interview before I left the room. Now, I do give people feedback when I interview them. How about you, Daryl?
If I really like them, I'll give them feedback, and that's usually my break. So if I'm interviewing a candidate that I know is going to be, normally I'm not the first interview as well. So I'm going to probably be interviewing after I've gotten feedback on the candidate. I've got a good sense about, hey, this person could be a fit. If at the end of that interview, I know they're a fit, I'll say, look, I'm not going to hide the ball here. I really liked our discussion today. I'd like to pursue, I'm going to be passing you on. I'd really like to, make sure that I'm answering any questions you have about my company. So I'm going to give feedback in that way. If they fail it spectacularly, I'm not rude about it. I typically are not going to get feedback there. So for me personally, on those companies that just didn't get back to me, I shared that experience earlier where I kept applying at one company, they weren't getting back to me. I kind of picked up on the hint after a number of applications and said, well, there's something that's not working here. I'm going to move on. I got no feedback, so I think a lot of times you're not going to get feedback. Now, if you have a recruiter in the middle, you can ask them, hey, how did I do? I want to get better. Is there any feedback you got? So there's some ways you might be able to elicit some of that feedback, but a lot of times because of, liability concerns, companies are not touching this. This could be a real a lightning rod for them, because if there's possible discrimination or any other kind of undertone in whatever answer they give, there's nothing but downside for them. So they're going to probably just clam up and not tell you. And that's kind of unfortunate because I know you're probably coming from a perspective, hey, I want to get better at interviewing. I want to, get the feedback, but I'll just, give you an honest answer. That's really why sometimes you're not going to get the feedback because, there's downside depending on how that answer is interpreted.
Yeah, and that's fair. And the feedback that I give is very generic. It's like, you want to be a cloud architect, go learn the network in the data center because they know everything other than the technology they're typically moving. Now, I don't say build your emotional intelligence, and I don't say work on your communication skills because there's too much challenge. But I will typically say, focus on learning the underlying technology.
Right.
Because that's usually it's half of the problem. Jesse, if you want to bring in the next one. Aqua, Daryl, how important is a cover letter to accompany a resume? Does the hiring manager care or need it or not?
It's screened out. I never see them, so I don't really know. I mean, if you're at a company that is smaller and they have a more traditional HR department, certainly it could matter. But I think a lot of times today, a lot of the books that you read are so old because today we're going to use services, like we have a cloud service that is a portal that's, basically scores resumes, does word search matches. Everybody uses the service. So all the hiring team interacts with HR, recruiter does the ultimate screening. It would have been stripped way before it got to me. So I wouldn't hold a lot of help. Now, if you're mailing something like you're, somehow mailing it physically, which I doubt even happens anymore. I don't know if it's an extra attachment. Are they going to click on it? Probably not. So I don't know about you, Mike. I'm thinking, an email is your cover letter accompanying your resume attached. So if you're saying it that way, then yeah, it matters a lot. The grammar, you getting to the point, not sounding like you're yammering, on and on and on person. So get to the point, tell them why you're interested in the company and give a quick synopsis of your qualification for the role and then say, please see attached resume that's attached or see attached resume for more details. I look forward to talking to you. Like something like that would be what I would call more of a modern cover letter. The old one that you would have seen in a cover letter book that you learned when you learned how to type when I was in college, not a thing. That's gone. In my opinion, it's gone.
I think so too. Except for healthcare jobs. They still want it for some reason, but healthcare is like 30 years behind.
That's a fair point. I mean, some industries are really still traditional. And so you have to play the game the way they play it. So understanding that is probably an important qualifier for sure. Tech is not that way.
No. Balwinder, what advice do you have for the resume of someone who needed to take a break for personal reasons? How do you explain the gap?
I've got some experience here. My wife,
me too.
She worked until my son was born. She took Friday off and we had our son on the weekend. That's how, we were poor when we were working. And then we were setting ourselves up to kind of have her stay home with our child, and she raised my boy. So when he was going off to college, I have a daughter as well. So it was really her going off to college. And then she wanted to get back in the workforce. Pretty long gap. And we struggled with that a little bit, and I'm assuming that maybe you took some time to travel or something. But, ultimately, I think you have to address it head on, number one. I don't want somebody glossing it over. Somebody says I was a consultant making $1 million and I'm the CEO of, yada, yada, and it's all nonsense is not impressive. And I'd rather you address the gap and act honestly about it versus trying to gloss over it in some kind of a grandiose goofball way that's pretty easy to validate. Fact that you've got LinkedIn and social media, which has to confirm your story, people check that. Trust me, I check it every time before I get on the call with somebody. I'm up the ladder a little bit before the first screen. I look at their LinkedIn profile. I'm not a big Facebook guy, but if I were, I would go look in any other social media locations to kind of figure out who the person is and what makes them tick. And for that reason, there's probably indications that if you took a cross country bike ride and took off, I know a guy in tech that was fantastic. Him and his wife saved up and they spent 2 years literally riding across Canada. And they wrote a blog as they did it. This was about 8-9 years ago. Fantastic story. And I would never have held it against him. I know how good he was. He landed on his feet, no problem. So, I mean, it kind of depends on the circumstances, Valwinder, but I would say you can't ignore it and expect that it doesn't matter. I would just explain it in the most direct terms as you can so that it's not a big, long conversation. Don't make it a complicated story. Simplify it and just get past it. Explain about the relevant work experience before the break. If you're talking about you're just getting back in the workforce after the gap, then explain what's motivating you to be back in the workforce. Because let's say you really don't want to work, but you happen to work and it's a necessity of money. You don't want to come back and say, yeah, I really like not working, but I need the money. I'll do anything. That's not really a why would they hire you endorsement. So you want to make sure that you're framing it also in the other side of your gap explanation of why you're a good hire for that person.
Yeah. And I think you do need to address it, Valwinder, because if you don't, the question is, did you have a nervous breakdown? Were you a drug addict? The mind wanders. So I can tell you, because I know a lot about this. There was a couple of years, like a lot of years, where I couldn't walk. I spent 8 hours a day in physical therapy. I lost the use of my left hand, my left foot. People that know me know that I have RSD. I've got 5 herniated discs, 2 torn rotator cuffs, labral tears in both hips, and a foot that's so badly damaged, they would do about 10 surgeries, but they can't because of the RSD that I have. And I remember speaking to the EVP, reported straight to the CEO of one of the bigger cloud companies a while back. And he said to me, tell me about this gap. And I said, I was training with some martial arts special people. I got invited as part of a martial arts delegation. Couldn't walk for a couple of years, but I was so motivated to be better that instead of taking a package, what I did is I did 8 hours a day of physical therapy. I started a blockchain data center, which has 1,000 systems in there and 600 GPUs doing calculations. I've been advising these businesses and I've been helping people get hired. So I've been doing all this tech stuff while I can't walk to make sure that I'm good. And he says, love that motivation. I don't know why.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just a matter of where, because if you don't, did somebody go cuckoo? Did they go to jail? Did they take drugs?
Yeah.
Don't let anybody.
There's explanations that wouldn't be positive, right? You don't want to assume those. And I'm assuming that you have an innocent explanation, but give the honest explanation you've got.
Yeah, and if somebody took time off to raise a family, that's a good reason. If somebody had a sick family member, that's a good reason.
Yeah.
If someone had to take care of some issues, it's a good reason. And you know what? If you wanted to go tour the world because you had a great career, that's still a good reason. Just make it clear. Yeah. Jesse, you want to bring in the next one? Adam say, will 2 to 3 years be short? Oh my God, so Adam is a really amazing person. He's a college student over in Asia. Yeah. He's one of my students, and he doesn't want. And I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to spend my whole life in a whole job. He's wondering if 2 to 3 years to the same company.
No, 2 to 3 years is pretty common nowadays. In fact, I see that more commonly. So I didn't mean to insinuate that a couple of times when you don't find a fit, you can say, look, I got to this company. I understood that it was this kind of job. It wasn't a fit for me. I made sure that I was hired to the next before I changed. I gave full notice, and I appreciated the opportunity they gave me, but it wasn't a fit for me. So I moved on. Like, that is okay. But if that's every single job for 5 in a row, the pattern is undeniable. And I'm going to pinpoint what is the issue here. Are they getting bored in 5 minutes? And think about it. The other side of this, Adam, that I shared in my example was the fact that I want to have reasonable certainty they're not going to hop skip out of my job after I've spent a year training them and I'm getting no productivity. That's a selfish thing as a hiring manager I don't want to see. So answer that question. That's the question they're asking. That's the concern they may have. So that's what you want to make sure you address, is another way to really get at the heart of your question here.
Yeah, and I think it's great. I took my first job. I was at MCI WorldCom. I was there for 9 months. And while I was there for 9 months, my manager did a review. And he said, Mike, you're average, but you're the best person on my team, but I can only give you an average. He said, I'm only allowed to give averages. So you're the best person. So here's an average. Here's a nothing raise. And I thought about it. And truth be told, I liked the manager so much, I would have stayed there for another year. And then some of the WorldCom executives came in. They gave a presentation. I watched this presentation. I literally saw these executives talk. They talked about buying the stock. They talked about how the company was growing. I literally got nauseous. Something in my stomach watched this presentation. I was physically sick. That next day, I called Steve Acrillion, the person that I have typically coming on every Friday. 3 days later, I had 2 job offers. One was with HSBC and the other was with a company called Knight Security. I was out of there in a second. Guess what? I worked on Wall Street, didn't enjoy it. It lasted about 1.5 years there. Then I went to Riverstone with Daryl, spent 3 years there, loved it. There were 13 layoffs while I was at Riverstone.
And you were one of them for a bunch of rounds, I remember.
Yeah, there was 13 rounds of layoffs when Daryl and I were there. We both survived all those rounds, and we did our thing. But
I got laid off and got hired back, actually.
You did, but there was a team of people that told that company that they couldn't live without you, Daryl. I can remember. I know some people that were really, really good and strong, saying this company will not survive without Daryl. I know a few of them, and you know what? When you came back, I think you were responsible for like 10% of the revenue or something, some amazing number by yourself. So they really couldn't have survived without you. But, after 13 layoffs, I actually got a call from Cisco and I said yes. And, I spent a decade at Cisco. I don't think I would have left Cisco. So the key is sometimes, Adam, you've got to, change a little bit on your way in. But once you reach a certain point in your career, that's when you got to stick it out. So if your first job was 1 year, and your next job was also a year, after that, it's got to be something better.
And I also, kind of in my career, I found opportunities in the company I was in. So don't be only short-sighted to the job that you got hired for. I usually found something that wasn't really getting fulfilled. I fulfilled that need. That need turned into a job. They hired me into a new job. They then evaluated it, and I got a raise. So I worked my way through the company without specific. It wasn't like I was waiting for postings. I never waited for postings in any company I've worked at. In other words, what I mean by that is I didn't look in the wanted ads internally and apply for every job and make my boss nervous that I was unhappy. I went and found a need, and usually adjacent to the job I had, evolved into a new role. And that then new role came with, another cycle of reviews, a raise, and more responsibility. And in all cases, after Riverstone, it became management opportunities and all the rest of the companies. So I think that's the other lesson I would share, Adam, is that, it may not be the job you're in. If it's a good company and you like working there, there's probably somewhere else in that company where you might be able to make a contribution, unless you're just, super uber technical and you're motivated by programming. And so that's what floats your boat. And that department is a bleep show. Then maybe you do need to look somewhere else. And that's 2 to 3 years is fine.
Yeah, totally. Jesse, you want to bring in something else? Chin. From a hiring manager perspective, how long is too long to work for the same company?
I don't know that there is, if you've done more responsibility. I wouldn't necessarily look at it as only longevity. I'm looking for advancement. So when somebody goes from one job to another, if they're taking on more responsibility, then that shows that they were actually learning, growing. Somebody that has the same job title for 40 years and hasn't done anything new, they're kind of a plotter. I'm not sure they're going to fit my culture. I'm just saying, so I definitely want someone that has a growth mindset. Yeah. I want them to constantly be learning. So longevity on its own is a way I'd like to really answer that is not in and of itself virtue. It needs to show growth.
I think Daryl's answer is perfect. I'd like to see people that are with a company long because it shows they've got
Loyalty.
a commitment. It
Yeah.
shows an integrity. It shows caring about the company. But if someone's the same systems engineer for 30 years straight, it means there's something wrong, because if they were good, they'd have gotten promoted out of it. If they were better, they would have been moved. So it means that they're good enough to not be fired, but they're not good enough to be moved out or moved up. So
and
probably not somebody I'm hiring.
It's not the worst way to make a living, though. I've known some system engineers that have done the system engineer job in a region for 20 years, or they've done the same territory for 3 companies and had the same customers, and they've had a very successful career. But I'm not necessarily impressed with that or deterred from that. I'm going to ask more questions to understand what's going on there.
And good plan. And I didn't pick systems engineering as a negative career. It's a good career.
No,
I just meant the same career. It could have been the same thing if someone was the first level marketing manager, or the first line project manager.
Yeah.
There needs to be something that shows that they're working hard to just be better.
Yeah, I agree.
And maybe if they did this and this was their whole job and they were real good at it, but they had some other cool thing that they were focused on, and that's why they were there. I just want to know someone's going to try hard and be great at what they do. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't try. And I'm all about, having people that try.
Well, and this is, everybody on this call probably has LinkedIn, or that's what I think is a very baseline networking, work networking type of site. I mean, what interest do you have? You can expose a lot of things about your, I would stay away from political stuff, but technology stuff and other things. I've had guys on there to act like it's Facebook and they're retarded. Like I think they have a mental deficiency. I'm not impressed about, giving your political views on LinkedIn or any business website. That is a no bueno for me. But if you're having other interests about, charities within reason, you can have those be, areas that you want to spend some of your personal time in, cancer prevention, those types of charities. Great. There's nothing wrong with that. You can follow different groups. So your profile in LinkedIn can explore other areas about your whole person. And maybe that's your answer. Look, I've had a really successful career, but I have passion about, whatever the charity for building houses, that Jimmy Carter, Habitat for Humanity is my passion. And every vacation I like to invest in this, or, there's other areas that can kind of flesh out your gifts and your generosity and other characteristics that are huge positives. So don't limit it to that. But I mean, again, I think in terms of duration, I didn't mean to insinuate, and I think these 2 questions are very good qualifiers. I was not trying to insinuate that just blind adherence to one company is some virtue if you're showing no growth. I think that could be seen as a negative.
That's where I'm at. Same thing. Jesse, you want to bring in the next one? GZ. What is a good way to find out the culture of the company you work for? You will work for. So to me, I read financial statements. That gives me a little bit about financial performance. There's lots of social media to see what people are actually doing. There's lots of news articles about a company. You get to see the things that are there. You can look at the company's product. You can see what customers say about a product. It's pretty easy to figure out. Plus, there's places like Glassdoor.
And then look at your network and see who works there. Talk to somebody who works there, right? That is not hard to do. Like you can find, if you got any kind of decent network in LinkedIn, I've got 2nd level connections to just about any company I'd ever apply at. I'll promise you. And if you actually have a social business interface, which is one of the things I did a lot. Now, the one thing I do is if you're first level with me, I know you. There's nobody in my first circle that I've just met. Never. Like somebody offers to be connected to me and I don't know who they are and I haven't met them face to face or in a professional setting where I know enough about them, I don't ever connect with them. But 2nd level is where your friends, if you're using that type of a connection, you can DM them and say, hey, I'm looking at your company. Would you be willing to entertain a chat? I've done that many times. And I'm always happy to do that. If somebody wants to know about a candidate or wants to know about a company, I'll take the time to do that because that's passing forward the same kind of courtesy I'm looking for.
Great way to answer that, Darryl. Jesse, you want to bring in the next one?
And that's more honest, right? Somebody that works there is going to have a better answer than
much better
some marketing nonsense that you read.
Chow fam, what if they ask what type of compensation are you looking for? Quite frankly, personally, Chow, I will dodge that question and redirect the question to other questions until it gets to the point where it's going to frustrate them. So I'm going to use my emotional intelligence to see when I can keep not answering that question. And the second it looks like I need to answer it, I'm going to need to answer it. But I'm going to try not to answer it first. I'm going to try to let them know that, I'm going to try and say, well, let's just talk. What I'm looking for is to be happy at an organization where I can make a difference, where I can make that organization grow, improve the organization's profitability, improve the organization's customer experience with their customers. And I'm looking for something that's going to fulfill me where I can help you. So why don't we talk about these things first, and then after that we can figure that out if we're a good fit. I try to save that for last.
I've answered that before of saying, if you look at my resume, I stay at an organization for a long time. So right now we're at the stage of making sure that I'm a fit. And I think money is really not the most important thing for us to discuss. Like, I'll put it off and I'll use my own, basic, because I've got credibility because I've only worked at 4 or 5 companies since college, and I'm getting, I told you when I graduated, I'm old. So that whole conversation, you definitely want to postpone until later. And if a recruiter's asking you, say, look, there's lots of ways I'm compensated. I really want to be a fit in the organization and be successful and make sure that I'm making a meaningful contribution before I'm going to worry about the exact dollar figure. And that's a way to put off your recruiter. Most recruiters, they're just trying to fill out whether you're going to be too expensive. It's an elimination question, guys.
Yeah.
Gals. It's all it is. So don't fall for that. They're trying to see if you're going to work for too cheap and you must not be worth it, or they're trying to figure out you're going to be too expensive. Let's quit wasting our time. That doesn't help you anyway. So, you don't want that answer out there.
Exactly. But if you meet with them, you do a good interview and they like you, now you've got some negotiation room.
Exactly. And maybe they change the job. Both Mike and I have had that in our career. Yeah. Where they say, oh, well, you're going to need too much money. I said, well, you can pay me whatever you think I'm worth. Let's talk about that once we're in the qualified conversation. You don't have to have that at the first stage with the recruiter. And if they do, you might not want to work there. I get called Darryl all the time. So CEO, thank you for that. At least a couple times a week. So when interviewing, what is more important to you? If the person's experience matches the job you're filling? I think both. Honestly, I don't know that one is more important than the other. I think interest is important. And I think the second half of your question, I'd like to, kind of explore a little bit. If a person doesn't show interest in my company and my team and my field, then I don't really care if they're qualified, if they're not going to do a good job because they're bored or because they just need a part-time job or a short-term stint, or they're looking, now that I work at Palo Alto, it's a pretty good brand. People know who they are. People that are looking to just hopscotch through a short stint here to have me on the resume. No thanks. I'm not playing that game. So I think that expression of interest, I look for that. If I get to the end of the interview and they have not expressed interest in the job, I mark that as a negative. And in fact, that may be a disqualifying thing. So I think they're both really important. You can, like we've talked about, CO, I think I would also say that when you look, or maybe a Trell, I should be calling you the CEO of Trell. I don't know, but you can certainly take advantage of the answers you've given to show your experience. So when you're not a perfect match, that is okay. And I think both Mike and I have had examples in our career where we weren't a perfect match, but the strength of our interview overcame those objections. And so that's the other thing that I think I would ask you guys to take as a takeaway. They're both important. I don't think one is directly more than the other, but not showing interest, not expressing an interest in the job is probably going to be perceived like, you can't be so coy that you think they're just going to beg you for a job. I mean, yeah, we do have a hiring shortage and qualified people are not a perfect commodity that's just on plentiful supply. Of course, that's true. but being too coy, thinking that's going to increase your leverage and not showing interest, have the salary conversation at the appropriate time, and that's its own conversation. You're not increasing your leverage by acting like you're too good for the job. If you're too good for the job, I don't want to hire you, period.
And I don't want anybody working for my team that doesn't want to be there, like at all. So, yeah.
Exactly. There's no upside to the bottom. You need to show interest in the job.
But I will say, CEO Trell, every job that I've ever interviewed, I was never a match for more than 20% of the job description, ever.
Yeah, that's true. You're not 100% overlap. That's true.
Jesse, you want to bring in the next one? Nagaraj Rao. Question from transition from engineer to architect. What advice on how to build business skills from a tech professional who is an engineer looking to transition into an architect role?
I think we unpacked this a lot today. I hope we gave you part of the answer already, which is your job as an architect is to understand how systems work together. Your job as an engineer is to have depth of knowledge on a specific engineering task on how a specific component works. And I think in this context is how I would define those two things. So when you're making that transition, you need to read outside of the exact area and understand that and share that knowledge in the interview process. You can also do things. One thing that both Mike and I have done in our careers, we've built our own labs. We've taken and rented lab time, and it is multi-component. One of the things you and I early in our career was a big deal was the CCIE. And, when they got online access to technology that you could get actual experience and you could rent that actual experience without spending, literally thousands of dollars on buying used stuff and trying to figure out how to make it work and how to get the code and all that. That was an end-to-end system view that really benefited your knowledge. And that is something that you would want to talk about. So when you talk about the architect and some of the Cisco certifications, that's end-to-end is what they're talking about there. Yeah. So if I interpret it that way, I think that's what I would say. In business, absolutely, you need to understand, read some 10Ks, go out and understand the business they're in, read particular market, like even a Wall Street type of view of the company, the growth potential of the company. Those are all ways that you can understand the business skills that are needed. And that's what you want to bring through when you're an architect. So, if it's a architect for cloud, which is obviously the topic I would expect, then what problems is a cloud solving in a unique and flexible way that used to be solved in the data center with components owned by the customer? That's, I did cloud, as Mike knows, for about 4.5 years at Dell. I had a whole team. That's what we talked about. And I learned more from the people I hired. I certainly wasn't an expert. They just pushed me into cloud from networking, and I had to learn it kind of on my own. But what I learned to become decent at it is I studied the cloud architectures. I understood the components that they worked with, the tools that they utilize, the, let's call it the agile software development style that you had to put into the cloud. All of those things were nutrients to the comprehension of the architecture stuff versus just the details of protocols and of languages, which is what you're going to get from engineering.
Yeah, and that's the difference. The engineer is going to be concerned about configuring it. We architects, we're going to design it. It's that whole end to end.
Yeah.
Where's the routing? Where's the security? Where's the compute? Where's the storage? We're not builders.
Where does it connect into the systems that have to work, which is the back end, and that whole ecosystem, if it's in, PCI transactional frameworks, how do I connect to those systems? If it's in sales and, databases of customers, how does it go into your CRM and into your, your sales transaction architecture? All of those are all pieces that have to fit together in a true end-to-end experience. And those are things you can also study, is what I'm saying. And that you want to be, not necessarily an end-to-end expert, but you need to know a little bit about all those things to be able to be fluent in the discussion.
Absolutely. But also, how does it impact the finance? So read the financial statements, Nagaraj. You have access to ROI modeling training. I know because it's been filmed and it's in your course. The emotional intelligence things, the presentation skills, all of that is the business skill. It's the asking the right questions. Nagaraj, there's 160 questions in one of the forms inside the course that you have. And it lists you the questions to ask the people. And it includes the business questions, the technical questions, the end-to-end questions. So you have access to it. It's in your course, the Cloud Architecture Development Program. Make sure you start going through those videos. All the videos that people complain about and say, Mike, they're not tech videos. Mike, it's not tech. It's not tech. It's not tech. I want another tech video. And I say, I've already got 200 hours of tech, but you need that other 300 hours of non-tech if you want to do these kind of jobs.
Yeah.
So it's in there, Nagaraj. Just actually go through that training when you have a chance. Because I know you have it. I know you ordered it. So I want to make sure you get access to it. Jesse, please bring in the next one. Takir Saeed, you're currently in a Microsoft partner. Are my options limited to Azure Cloud only, or is it better to get a Cloud Plus? So Takir, I'm going to tell you this. I say this every day, but you may have not have heard. I don't want you to learn Azure. I don't want you to learn AWS. I don't want you to learn Google. I want you to learn the cloud. So I don't get certified to drive a Mercedes and then get a new certification for a Toyota and a new certification for a Chevy. I learn how to drive. There's a common thing on all vehicles. There's a steering wheel. There's an accelerator on a brake. Takir, well, here's what we have. We have three kinds of storage. We have block storage, object storage, and file storage, and all those storages are going to be used on all clouds for various reasons. Know what those reasons are. We have firewalls, IDS systems, IPS systems for security. Know what they are and how they work. And that way, you can select one because you're not going to be using in a cloud security WAF. You're going to be pulling something like a Palo Alto firewall from the marketplace in the cloud. And then you're going to be using load balancers to load balance between these things. We're not using those basic cloud native things. We're going to do it. And with Azure, guess what? You're still going to do it. So now you got routers. Doesn't matter which routers you learn. Why? Because you're going to learn BGP and OSPF. They're the two things that you need to know. And it really doesn't matter which device you're on. Load balancers. Guess what? You learn a network load balancer and learn an application load balancer. And it doesn't matter if you're on the cloud or off the cloud. It's the same thing. So I would say I generally recommend avoiding the CompTIA certs. And the reason I generally recommend avoiding the CompTIA certs is they're good certifications, but they're not really big on any hiring manager's list. So here I would get one certification, and it would be either an Azure expert, it would be a Google professional cloud architect, or it would be a, an AWS certified solution architect professional. Then, Takir, what I would do is I would find an area that you like. If it's networking, I would do a Cisco certified network professional in addition to that. If it's security, I would do like a CEH master or an offensive security professional. Something that's got a lab where you got to prove it and you got to know what the heck you're doing. That's how I would build my certification portfolio. But remember, these jobs are not about certifications. They're about being able to make a change in the customer's business, transform the business, and the technology is just your tool. So that's my advice. Darryl, what would your advice be?
I ran across this, like I said, I had 4.5 years running the cloud team, and Dell's selling hardware. They really don't have a cloud solution. They did buy, and then I guess it's now been spun out, but they did buy the VMware cloud stack. So they had the technology there to some degree that was kind of closer. But in the end, I had to become fluent at explaining that, what Azure does, Google has an equivalent, AWS has equivalent. And so being a little bit fluent in understanding the common, what they call the same common function is an important way to demonstrate competence. So I think being only in an Azure speak limits your ability versus making it great. So Azure does it its way. Obviously, Microsoft has always been that way. Their OS is, very opinionated. They took some Linux, they took some Apple, they did their thing, and it's their thing now. Obviously, there's roots of Linux in the other platforms for sure. So understanding Linux and then building upstream from that Linux root, if you want to really understand the architecture at the component layering perspective. But I think all of those can complement each other, and I wouldn't feel trapped in Azure. GCP, if they've got a big, they're a little later to the game. AWS is probably the more dominant with Azure bringing their application strength to bear. So Azure is obviously a big boy. I think AWS, in my opinion, is the biggest. I think in market share for sure. So you want to be able to understand all three in essence, or all four. You know, if you're in federal government, FedRAMP is an important component of the cloud, operations that you need to understand as well. So there's different ways that you can approach it depending on the kind of positioning you want to have in your architecture arsenal. But I would not limit it to Azure. I would understand how it. Now, if you get free training and they're going to make you really, really smart in Azure, take it, consume it, no problem there. But remember, you want to then expand your resume and your vernacular and your fluency well beyond it, and start from what you know. I know, Mike, that's one thing that I did. Remember the MPLS router we had at Riverstone? Well, I went and interviewed at Alcatel, and they had a similar technology from Temetra, was the competitor that they had acquired. And so I literally found somebody that knew the Riverstone technology, or I asked questions that mapped into my knowledge of the Riverstone technology. I never took a class. I was an expert on the router in 3 weeks. I went in a big project and supported it as a native expert in 3 weeks. I read the manuals, but I didn't go through any formal training. I literally just picked this guy's brain, who was super smart, and he was patient enough to put up with the way I needed to learn as fast as they were asking me to learn, by asking a bunch of questions that I can map to what I knew. And I'm answering Takir's question from that standpoint, that learning one cloud very well is nothing wrong with that. That's great.
No.
But then you need to go beyond that and know you're not stuck.
And I think the key, Takir, is I don't care. You can become the best Azure expert, and that's perfect. But in your mind, know a load balancer is a load balancer. Know a virtual machine is a virtual machine. Know that a private line is a private line. When people start coming to me and they start spewing about ExpressRoute, it's like, what is ExpressRoute? And if they can't tell me that it's a private line or a leased line, I have no interest in what they have to tell me, because all they've done is they've memorized a brand. I want to know what is the tech. So, and I tell my AWS people the same thing. If you have to give me some branded name with Elastic stuck in front of it, I'm not interested. I want to know that my architects can design the solution. And if they stick it in a regular data center, an OpenStack Ansible cloud, which I love, an Nutanix cloud, which I love, an Nutanix cloud connected to the AWS cloud and the Azure cloud, which I think is really reality for the future, I want to know that when you know what it is. So if you tell me that I'm using a virtual machine, I got it. If you tell me I need a container, I get it. Just don't tell me the brand. And guess what? Takir, if you do that, every cloud, you're always going to know what to do. All you're going to have to do is go to the store and say, oh, wait, I need a virtual machine. Azure Virtual Machine, AWS EC2, Google Compute Engine.
Yeah.
There's a term for it on the Palo Alto.
A container's a container, really, anymore. So it doesn't matter what type of container per se, but you can learn that from Azure.
Yes. But remember, the certifications don't test things that are really related to these jobs. Certifications test you on the name of a service and how to configure it. An architect is a designer. So the certification does help your resume look good, but it does not have anything to do with competency. So if your time is focused on certifications, you're not going to be building the skills you need to get hired. So get those certifications, knock them out of the way, because you got to have something to make up for gaps of experience, and then focus on actually learning the job. Don't worry about the certification.
Yeah, 10 versus 2 real important ones. I'll take the 2 more important ones than 10.
Yeah. In fact, there's this people, they want to get 10x certified, and they do it. They learn Alexa, they learn a little about databases, a little about maintenance, a little bit about development, a little about DevOps. By the time they're done, they don't know anything about anything, because they know so little about so many things, they're not usable for anything. So I tell people, don't get 10x AWS certified. Get the best professional or expert one you can, and maybe get a second one to show some strength, and stop your certifications, focus on being great.
Yeah, I agree.
Jesse, I think we can do a few more. I know it's getting pretty late for Darryl over there. So Jesse, if you want to bring in a couple more. Kishore, how does, I'm assuming that means Palo Alto Networks. I don't really deal with a lot of acronyms, because everybody, unless they're standardized. So how does PANW, adapt to security threats that peaked during COVID as internet usage was a lot higher. I don't really think that had any bearing on anything, Kishore, but I'll see what Daryl has to say.
No, I think okay. So one thing that definitely changed in our business, to answer this, and sorry, I've been kind of on the end of my day, and I've got a team of 20, so I just cleared my Slack. I apologize. So I see the question. When we hit COVID, we put the brakes on hiring and figured this could be bad. Like nobody knew, basically in the middle of the pandemic what it was going to mean. It actually ended up being a boost to our business because we had some SD-WAN as well as some remote access assets that hadn't been really built out. We poured a ton of investment because we had a lot of cash, and we increased the capabilities of those two assets a ton, and we had massive sales. What we found in those sales, that the companies had a threat landscape that was very predictably small compared to the threat landscape they had after everybody moved home and worked out of coffee shops and worked out of everywhere. And so our story to the market has been, look, you really need to have a platform that works together to get your arms around the security threat landscape that you actually have to care about. It's no longer valid to just secure your servers inside your data center and then secure your users connecting to that data center, because we're connecting everywhere now. Like when I'm talking to you right now on YouTube, I'm on my work computer. So I'm now in the internet, and we have to understand. So I've got a lot of technology on this work laptop that secures the connections and knows what's happening in those connections. And so that's where I think it is higher, no question about it. And that's really simple, deduction. The workforce is no longer inside of a building. They're anywhere they want to work from. And, we even have a very generous policy called flex work, where if you get the job done, I let my people work wherever. I had a guy that last year went to Florida and worked for 3 weeks from a condo that his father-in-law had, and his kids were having fun at this resort, and he was in his room doing his job, and nothing dropped off. He still did his job. He wasn't playing. And that was completely okay with me, because it didn't matter whether he was from home or the office or there, he still did his job. So I think that work pattern is creating the threat landscape I'm addressing in my answer.
And it's interesting, Kishore, because, and I know you, I've not worked with a company that didn't have remote access employees in the last 20 some years. So for me, there is no new threat landscape because everybody had remote access employees. I haven't worked with anybody that didn't need firewalls.
Now is remote. That's what's different. The whole workforce during the pandemic went remote. So the amount of technology that had to be secured everywhere instead of just that remote group is what I was talking to. So
so you're talking about the companies that weren't those big remote access,
or they only had a small subset that now has the whole subset.
Okay.
Right. So now they had, like Dell had a sales force of say 40,000, but they had 100,000 employees. Except for factory, that 100,000, how many went home? A vast majority of them, except for maybe a few factory workers during the critical times, and they had to still work through the pandemic with those employees. And that's my point. So the percentage of workers that went to the remote really put pressure on IT to properly deploy secure technology. And that's where the landscape went up, because they didn't. They had to cut corners. It wasn't available.
Okay, because they didn't have it before. They weren't the big banks that I've consulted with or the global organizations that already just had their employees that were working from home the whole time. And they were staffed to deal with hundreds of thousands of people working from home in case of disaster.
Well, my brother works as customer service at Bank of America today.
Yeah.
And he was going into a call center guaranteed up until the pandemic. Now he calls from home. That employee's link did not have security when he went home, because he couldn't do his job when the old model had a call center. But when that call center shut down and he got pushed home, something had to follow him to home. That opened the threat landscape now that comes through for that role, which wasn't ever done that way. Now the call center software had to be secure. Now the company was connecting to the internet through a very insecure, edge gateway. All of those things had to be properly set up, and that's where we had a boon in sales. And ultimately that is a higher threat level for every company that went through that. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just tuning the focus on, even
the
though
number of it
workers had lived in that role, new roles that had never been remote ever before the pandemic now are. And that's what I'm speaking to, Mike.
Yeah, that makes sense. When I did Bank of America, I brought phones to their financial advisors. They were secured by a router, which was a firewall that also had IPsec that went back to another VPN concentrator. But you know what? That was the financial advisors. I see your point. Your point is not everybody was included in those high security designs because they actually had to go to the office.
Think about how expensive that would be for 100,000 people in one like that. You can't afford it. So you're going to have to do something that is manageable. Can I issue a laptop that I can remotely control and make sure the OS is secure? Can I make sure that they can install rogue apps that will screw things up? Can I make sure that it's secured by an endpoint security device, which we sell? All of those things are what we advise our clients to do. And then I don't care as much about the house having a gamer in it and having a bunch of other, God knows what kind of IoT crummy device that could be inside threat. All of those don't matter if I secure the device. So that's what we advise our customers to do. Take control of the device that is the business asset, secure it, and then make sure that it has security that you control as a company so you can keep it up to date, because nobody's going to do the updates, right? That's what we advise as part of the new posture of the post-COVID world.
Yeah, and that was the posture that I was doing when I was at Cisco. We'd install the agents on the desktop that would speak to the IDS, IPS systems. But that, you know what? Similar concept, but a very different market. I was only dealing with those top 1% customers.
Yeah, this is
and
now.
That's all I've ever dealt with.
80%, right? We're at 80% now with post-COVID. If you're in professional work and you're not in a physical producing widget role, or a farmer or somebody that goes out in the land.
Great point, Daryl.
That's what I'm saying.
That's a great point. It's not that everybody was doing these big high performance, high availability systems. It's just that's all I saw. There were all these other, and actually, you know what it looked like? It looked like, everybody was either designing things one way, or you'd show up and people didn't know the network, and it would just be little mishmash every stuff that a Linux guy that was also the Windows guy that was doing the networking world that was also putting the firewall in.
Yeah.
And that was the stuff that I used to rip out and start putting in big things, which I guess is the stuff that you're ripping out to secure things now, coming up with that end-to-end security architecture. That makes sense.
We also launched a much more affordable version of our technology that can be out at the home as well, or at the small business. So we've also adjusted to the COVID marketplace to be more competitive in those scenarios where companies have so much that they have to deploy. So that's another reaction. The answer is
I probably need to get one of those firewalls for my house. I have a good firewall, but it's not supported by people that actually understand support. So it makes me very, very nervous having that cloud managed firewall inside of my house.
Yeah.
So Jesse, you want to bring in one or two more? How do you pick your tech lead and how do you mentor them? That's a good question from Chinlin.
So in my business, my team lead is the equivalent, because we're more in the customer service business than we are in tech. I mean, we are supporting the enablement and we bring technical resources to the customer. So we're kind of the quarterback of that relationship. But in the customer success business, my tech lead, which I call team lead, I needed at least a year of experience. They had to know the industry, they had to know the job. And I also wanted to make sure that they were able to create the credibility and give the right advice for the actual, frontline manager to know, that they would go to that team lead. If I get somebody in between me and the person that isn't doing that job, I'm actually increasing the size of my problem. I'm not decreasing it. So I carefully had a few requirements, which was on-job experience, knowing the job, ideally some managerial experience in previous roles because they hadn't done it for me. And then thirdly, it was very important that they had the patience and the mindset. Part of the job is also interfacing in customer success. You're kind of the glue that connects the customer to different parts of your company. You also connect different parts of your company together to create an answer for your customer. And so that team lead was also and is the interface for, say, the sales regional managers. I talk to the national managers. I need them to have the professional skill set to be able to speak in that level. Like you were saying earlier, you know, to the talk of an executive is very different than the talk to a frontline person. You know, the time that you have with them is shorter. You have to get to your point. You have to summarize the most important issues. You have to get decisions made and then move on. You're getting 15 minutes of attention, whether your hour meeting is, you know, if you get an hour meeting with them, you're getting 15 minutes of that hour. They're on their phone after 15 if you haven't grabbed their attention, and you're very likely not going to keep them for the whole hour. So if you can't figure out how to say what you got to say in 15 minutes, you got nothing accomplished. So that's part of the skill set that I'm looking for in the team lead, and I'm mentoring them for that. So on the mentor side, I increased my one-on-one with them. I doubled it. The second thing I did is I make it okay to fail, but I don't want repeated failure in the same way. So when they make a mistake and a mistake happens, I'm immediately okay with that. I say, look, you're busy. You're going to drop a few balls. Dropping the ball is okay. The question is, did you see it got dropped? Did you pick it up? And are you not going to drop it again? If the answer is no, then that's a good ball that you dropped. I'm glad you learned that lesson. Let's move on. So when I mentor them, I say a very simple phrase: meet your people where they are, understand what their strengths are and encourage those. When you find a weakness, you need to find a solution to help them. And if they're motivated to change it, hold them accountable and get them to get better. That's all they're going to do to mentor their people. I ask the same thing of them. So that's kind of more of a conversation and more of a relationship through the act of doing the job. That's where the mentoring really sticks anyway. So it's not about, you know, the brilliance I can slay them with every week in my hour conversation. It's more about taking the examples in their team, using those examples to explain the way I would approach it, giving them advice on how to approach their people. And it's all about communication in the end. My ability to communicate to them, their ability to communicate to people. So as you get to manage of a manager versus a manager of a frontline, the thing different is, how do you teach them how to manage groups of people and how to have an impact, how to set objectives, how to, you know, set the tone, how to build culture. All of those things are important parts of what you want to mentor versus just, you know, if you do this, you get this result. And so let's focus on the things you have to do. That's part of it. That's not all of it. You've got a lot more that you need a mentor on. And I try to do that in my sessions with the people, especially one-on-one. And then we have Slack and we talk dozens of times a day. And, you know, there are other things that we do that really help give them real-time interaction during the week. But we try to spend more time unpacking the biggest of the issues in our one-on-one that now is an hour with my team leads.
Sounds good. There's 2 or 3 of these questions that we can pick off real quick. So I'm going to do a few of them. One of them is from Brave Man Jesse. Jesse, if you can pull up the Brave Man one that says, found myself in an on-premises type environment. And so Brave Man's question is, found myself in an on-premise type environment, no cloud, should I quit? No. If you like the job, keep it. Brave Man, here's the thing in an on-premises environment. If you have routers, if you have switches, if you have firewalls, if you have load balancers, if you have block storage, object storage, and file storage, and guess what you do? In most data centers, you are doing everything that you would be doing on the cloud. And what do you think you're going to do as an architect on the cloud? You're going to be designing those same technologies. So you're going to take the virtual machines that were in VMware, and you can convert them to a virtual machine and host them on a cloud. You're going to take the same firewalls that you had in the data center. Say it's a Palo Alto firewall, great firewall. Now, in perfect world, you could go to the cloud and rack it in there, but you can't. So you're going to buy the same Palo Alto firewall. You're going to put it on a virtual machine from a marketplace and run it in the cloud. Brave Man, the cloud is no different than a network in a data center. All it is a network in a data center with some Linux software and some hypervisors, and it's been virtualized. So no, if you like what you do, keep doing it. If you don't like what you do, then go to the cloud or go somewhere else, but you should be in good shape. So
the only thing I would add, Mike, is your orchestration layer is probably missing in the on-prem environment, right? So if you want to learn the cloud, learn orchestration on your own and learn those other things well, because the two can fit together and you can get from this to the cloud is the other thing I would add to that.
In fact, Daryl, most people don't realize this, and I know you probably don't know. I have every one of my students go to our data center, set up server virtualization, build containers, build firewalls, build VPN concentrators, set up the LAMP stack, set up NFS, set up Samba, and set up Active Directory. And when they're done, my students build the cloud. Why? Because I want them to learn the control plane or that orchestration layer.
Perfect.
So, yeah. But they're learning it in a data center because that's how you build the cloud. It has to be on the data center. So brave man, you may even get to build the cloud.
Somewhere it goes back to physical, even though everything's virtual. That you
it's still going to physical stuff. And there was one question in there about someone that was over 50. I wanted to address because that's something that
I resemble.
that was real simple. Elvis. Okay, so what advice do you have someone in their 50s switching to careers to solution architect? Good news, it's much easier for you, Elvis. So I got to say this, and there's a video. Jesse, can you make the video? Can you find the video from the YouTube channel and paste it in the chat window? I have a video on being successful at any age. There's two sets of times. If you are less than 35, it's a little harder to get someone an architect job. Because when you're over 35, what happens is the world assumes you have some wisdom, you've had some life experience, you're not reckless, you're safe. So most architects are 35 to 60. They're not 19-year-olds. Now, when I've got someone really smart like Jesse on my team who is a great architect, for Jesse, it's about taking his natural intelligence, his natural energy, enthusiasm, passion that comes from his youth, and showing that exuberance while still giving Jesse the necessary business acumen, communication skills, emotional intelligence, and presence. But in his case, he's going to have to show the world, or an Adam say, hey, everybody, I'm here. I'm excited about work and I'm ready to work. When you're like me, or you're like Daryl, we've got experience. We've got wisdom. So the hiring manager knows we don't learn as fast because we're not 20, but we don't make mistakes either. We ask the right questions. We have much more business acumen in general, more executive presence, emotional intelligence. So Elvis Toe, I'd say just do it. Just do it. You want to be a solution architect? Just do it. You can do it. And your age actually is an advantage to you. Now, if you're over 75, that's not an advantage. But, if you're 50, 55, 60, the people that I get in my program, I remember one of them says, Mike, I'm over 50. Is it going to be a problem? And I said, no, not at all. Now, when a couple of weeks ago in class, he actually not only did he design this beautiful architecture that was very complicated, but he proceeded to tell me how he had a dream. And in his dream, he was talking about the EBGP and the IBGP, and he had already set up his load balancers, and he described the whole thing in his dream. So when Derek said this to me, it brought me to tears. Honestly, I was so happy because I knew he got it. So just do it, Elvis. It doesn't matter your age.
Yeah, I agree. I think, ultimately the things you don't want to come across that you're tired, worn out, bored, to not interested in work anymore. That's where the age becomes a negative. If you've got energy, enthusiasm, you still want to learn, it's a number. And 50 is pretty young, actually. Yes. I joke that I'm old, but I know 50 something is not old. I've got a lot of life left. So, certainly don't get that in your head.
Absolutely. And I'm at that age group too. And people are reaching out to me every day. You know what? I learn new things each day. Life is fun. I think let's go for 10 more minutes. So Jesse, one more. And then I think we should end because I want to be really respectful of Daryl's time. I haven't seen Daryl in a while. I'm always happy to see Daryl. I talk to Daryl all the time, although I haven't seen him in ages.
Yeah, we've been on camera for a long time.
Yeah, we have.
That trip to Bahamas we've talked about for a long time. I still think about that conversation we had years ago about coming down and visiting.
Yeah, anytime you're ready.
Yeah.
Okay, this is from Evo. She's one of my students. She's absolutely lovely. She's from Bulgaria. I think she's in Hungary right now or England right now. Daryl, would you be willing to describe a use cases that influenced your professional growth?
So do you have a way of interpreting? I don't know what you mean by use cases.
Like a big project that you had that kind of would have changed.
So in a couple of, well, yeah, sure. I mean, just let's pick on a real simple one. When we were selling MPLS switches, they were a carrier thing. and the carriers were 5 or 6 in the country. There weren't that many. We had a few service providers that were using them. They were trying to figure out a way to maybe do multi protocols, so they were moving from ATM and switch networks, circuit based networks over to IP, and that's really where we had our market. And one of the things that the use case that I found actually was the video, and the fact that video had a low latency requirement. Mm-hmm. We had a low latency switch. Yep. And there was nobody that had something in at that time. It's dime a dozen now, but at that time we didn't have a lot of competition with the capabilities we had, but we didn't have a solution. And I put the two together, and that really influenced the growth in my career, because I ran across, Mike was one of the smart guys that I had to pull on the project that I found through my company. He was called the architect or solution or corporate engineer.
Oh, were they corporate? First, we were corporate systems engineers.
Right,
then we were principal consulting systems engineers, architects. It kind of changed by the month.
But that role was a corporate resource that knew their stuff, that could solve some of the complicated problems, and I was solving the business problem. That was what I saw my role as. I had to go in and figure out what the opportunity was. It flew me out to St. John's, Canada, in Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia, flew out there, met with a set-top vendor, believe it or not. They got our router. I helped them set it up. They showed that it worked. I did all kinds of stuff, and it had a massive influence on my career. I met new people. I learned new things. I had an application that worked. We sold some definite solutions. That became a description that helped. I went to another big company here in Oklahoma, Wiltel, which had a national, they basically did transport for the networks. So they were at the time a way of taking NBC from New York to other affiliates. And I
remember that project.
They rode the network, and they needed some low latency switches. Again, I had some knowledge in my other use case. I just applied it to the new use case. So I think this is the way I would explain it. But let me who cares what I did? It's not about me. I think what is important is understand the problem you're solving, solve it, take that knowledge and process, and you can apply it anywhere. Take confidence from that and apply it where you are. That's what I would say. And that's what really led to an opportunity. The last thing I'll share, and I've shared this with a number of people, it's kind of ironic that every single job, the last 3 jobs, which, it was Alcatel, Dell, and now, the big companies. I had a little startup that, kind of went poof, but the three big companies that I've worked with recently, Alcatel, Dell, and Palo Alto, I didn't apply for a management job at any 3 of those. It was an individual contributor job within, probably 3 or 4 months. Literally, the manager goes, "Why don't you do this?" And I'm like, "Because I just got hired for this job, and I really want to be good at this job." They said, No, I want you to do some team mentorship. I want you to be in charge of the team. I'll be happy to do that, but don't take away from me learning the job, because I want to have credibility and understanding what I'm doing. And in all 3 jobs, it led quickly within the first year into managing the team I was on. Alcatel, actually, it was the second role I took that did that. But ultimately, to answer the question in a different way, just be good at what you're doing. Don't sit there and look for a title. Don't go there and look for a specific outcome. Be really passionate about doing a great job at what you're doing, and success and opportunity will find you, I promise. It has for me in every single job.
Interesting. So, Daryl, I'm so happy you said that. Eva is one of my students. She's amazing. I think I had this conversation with my students earlier today on our call, and I said, it doesn't matter what you want to do. It matters that you focus all your time, all your effort, all your love, all on one thing. Focus on being the best at it, and it doesn't matter what it is, you'll be successful.
Yeah.
And you're hearing the same thing from Daryl in different words. Oh, Jeannie, my friend Jeannie is here, which is really wonderful. So I want Daryl to really see the impact of everyone that was here. So I'm going to ask you to put 2 things in the chat box. I want him to really see it, because he's got a window open too. First, I'd like you to all type #CloudHired, because that's our motto around here, because we get people cloud hired. So pop that in the window, and let's show Daryl that, we can come together as a group. And then when you do that, I want to show him how exactly international we are. So he gets a feel for the number of lives that he's been able to speak to. So if you can pop this in the window, I want Daryl to experience what I do, because I want him to see what it's like to talk to people from this big of a group and to see the kind of response. So, you know, Kishore, Chin Lim, Evo, Abigail, Amaranth, Mrs. Lamon Jamin, what a cool name. Hey, that's me. Io, it's so good to see you. I've got a lot of Io friends and a lot of Io students, but this happens to be my friend Io. Chin Lim, Ian, wow, Ian, good to see you. Jane Cheedy, good to see you. Nagaraj, good. Janie, David, Brendo, Mohammed, Aqua, good to see you again. My friend saw you this morning. Mohammed, another Mohammed, Adam Say, T. David in Nigeria, fantastic, or from Nigeria, Cedro. Holy, okay, now, can you tell everybody where you're actually at right now? I see we've got one person in Nigeria. T. David is from Nigeria. Cali, San Francisco, Melbourne, Australia. Okay, keep going. This is kind of cool. I'm pretty sure we've got some people in a lot more places than this. But there's a delay. I know Or's, I believe his family is from Nigeria. Io's actually in Canada, but obviously he's Nigerian with that name. Chidi's in England. Jeannie's Ethiopian in Las Vegas. Abigail's actually American in Asheville. Balwinder's from India, but she's in Texas. Aqua's in England. He's Cameroonian. Well, he's English. Evo's in Denmark. Mrs. Lamon Jamin is in Texas. My God. Cedro's in Atlanta. Alonzo's in Texas. I know that. Babita's in Texas. Nagaraja's in Texas. Amaranth is in Canada. Alonzo's in Texas. Ria's actually in the UK. Brenda's in Dallas. Ian is in the UK and he's staying up. Ian's a very close friend. Ian, so good to see you. Adam Say, Kuala Lumpur. But Mohammed is in Somalia. I mean, seriously. Elvis is Cameroonian in Cameroon. Hey, that's me is in San Diego. Meslam and Jamin is Cameroonian in Texas. Max Sheriff is from the UK. Pierre is, I think he's Cameroonian, if I can remember, or he's from Benin or Gabon. I don't remember. But
you've got some late Europeans, man. This is getting late in Europe.
Yeah, we do. Montreal.
And tomorrow in Kuala Lumpur.
Tomorrow in Kuala Lumpur. And so, thank you all for doing this. Yeah. People are still popping in their locations there, Daryl. I just wanted you to see, how nice it is to be able to see this kind of community. Shapur's Persian, but he's in Montreal. So it's everywhere. India. This is just, it amazes me. And I was the guy that didn't have a Facebook page until a year ago.
I still don't. That's not my thing, but LinkedIn, I'm there.
Well, I was never Mr. Social Media, but it enables me to communicate. And we like to stream to 10 different channels at the same time. So Abigail Mark says, this is life-changing for me. Thank you every day. Abigail, that's why we do this. We want to give great people like you and all the other people that are here a chance to have a really great life and career. From Togo, even Kombi is actually from Togo. That's another country that we're in Africa. So, this is seriously impressive stuff to have this many people living from so many places. Daryl, you're a good friend. You always have been. I'm so thankful that you came and joined us. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Great questions, great conversation. Happy to do it.
Daryl, I'll probably give you a call tomorrow because I would love to actually sync up after the fact.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I just need to find out what happened with my cat. My cat had a wound on her leg. My wife took the cat to the veterinarian. I don't know what happened to my cat, but I'm all kinds of, I got to go find my kitten, my little cat, Cindy. She kind of runs the house. She's like a princess queen. I'm not even sure if she doesn't own the house and we just don't are her servants, but she's my baby girl.
Sure thing. Okay. Well, thanks, Mike. You got my number. Thank you much. Have a great weekend for everyone else out there.
You too. Take care, everybody. Io, good to see your name up there. Good to see your face there as well. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.